To become Pokemon Champion, you need a strong team. This is a compilation of my videos covering the best playthrough Pokemon across various categories and in every mainline Pokemon game. With these videos together, you can assemble your ultimate Pokemon team in any game of your choice. The earliest Pokemon you encounter in a playthrough are usually weak and just end up as bodies to fill out your party with. However, some of these early game Pokemon can be deceptively powerful. So today I'm covering what I believe to be the best first Pokemon to catch in every mainline Pokemon game, based on how well that Pokemon matches up against the early game and beyond. The only rule is that the Pokemon must be obtainable before beating the first gym. We begin with red, blue, and yellow, and the main priority is finding something that will help against Brock. Sure, he's a pushover with Bulbasaur or Squirtle, but with Charmander or Pikachu, you'll want or need help. While you can find long-term useful Pokemon early, such as Nidoran male for an eventual Nidoking, or Spearow for an eventual Fearow, you can find those Pokemon again later, and don't really need them now since they're bad against Brock. Nidoran does get Double Kick at a low level in yellow, but it's not stab, and Onix's defense is through the roof. It's literally base 160, the second highest in all of Gen 1, and still in the top 15 to this day. Yellow version does have Mankey on Route 22, which gives you a stab fighting move for the rock-type fight, but again, Onix's defense is insane. But on the flip side, its base special stat, special attack and special defense were just one stat in Gen 1, is only 30, tied for the 9th worst in Gen 1 alongside Sandshrew, Rhyhorn, and Brock's other Pokemon, Geodude. So all you really need to beat Brock is a strong special move that is not resisted. And there is one non-starter Pokemon that can give you that. The best first Pokemon to catch is Caterpie or Metapod. Not for them, but for Butterfree. Metapod evolves into Butterfree at the low level of 10. That Butterfree will then get Confusion, a 50 power special move, at level 10 or 12 depending on the game. And Butterfree's special stat is 80. Almost triple Onix's. You also might confuse the Onix, potentially making it hurt itself instead of attacking, or have Brock waste a turn using a full heal. Now you may be thinking, wait, hold on, Butterfree is just gonna die instantly. It is 4 times weak to rock. And in other generations, you would be right. But in Gen 1, Brock's Pokemon do not know any rock moves. Beyond that, Butterfree is unlikely to stick around on your final team, but in the interim, its various status powders can come in handy, especially Sleep Powder. In Gen 1, Sleep could last up to a horrifying 7 turns, and the Pokemon didn't even get to act on the turn it woke up. Use it to beat Brock, then as an anesthesiologist for a while. Sounds pretty good to me. Next is Gold, Silver, and Crystal. These games have the lowest level gym leader in all of Pokemon, with Falkner's Ace being just a level 9. So as you might imagine, there aren't that many options. However, there is still a clear winner. That Pokemon is Bellsprout, found pretty easily in the routes neighboring the city. This might confuse you at first, since grass is not particularly helpful against the flying and bug gyms, the first 2. But you're not using the Bellsprout. A man in Violet City will trade your Bellsprout for an Onix named Rocky, giving you one of the strongest Pokemon possible this early in the game. It won't have a rock move until level 14 and is technically weak to Falkner's Mudslaps, but remember, insane defense. It is a stone wall that they will struggle to kill. Plus it starts out knowing Screech, a useful defense dropping move to make up for its low attack. Beyond Falkner, it'll have a rock move for Bugsy's Bugs, and crucially, while Whitney's Miltank can unfortunately attract it, Onix still resists all of her moves. Rocky is not good enough to remain on your team as just an Onix, but if you go through the unfortunate annoyances of getting a Metal Coat off a Wild Magnemite, trade evolving it, and using the Iron Tail and Earthquake TMs to give it good moves, you'll have a very strong Steelix, which is absolutely an endgame worthy Pokemon. In Gen 2, it has 10 resistances, 2 immunities, and 4 weaknesses. But half of those weaknesses are always physical, and thus have to contend with its massive defense. And remember, it's a traded Pokemon. The whole time, it's getting boosted experience. Rocky the Onix is absolutely your best first catch in Generation 2. Okay, I guess Bellsprout technically is the first catch, but like, you're using the Onix, they're gonna share the trophy. Side note, if you're wondering why I did not discuss Mareep, Gen 2 actually blocks your path to Mareep's grass on Route 32 until after you beat the first gym. Next is Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. This choice is quite tricky because several of the front runners overlap their typings with starters. This does not disqualify them, but it is a factor I have to consider. For example, I think Shroomish is great. Its grass type can help with Roxanne, Effect Spore can get you out of a bind, and it gets Leech Seed, an incredible move very early. But of course it overlaps with Trico, and eventually Blaziken with fighting as Breloom. Ruby and Sapphire, but not Emerald, have an in-game trade in Rustboro for Makit the Makuhita if you trade over a Slackoth. I think Hariyama is an excellent Hoenn playthrough Pokemon with its massive bulk, huge attack, and low evolution level. And getting one with boosted experience that you can use for Roxanne, Norman, Sydney, Glacia, and Steven is huge. Makit is also guaranteed Guts, a much better ability for Hariyama than Thick Fat. However, the fighting type obviously overlaps with Combuskin and Blaziken. Finally, there's two psychic types to consider, Ralts and Abra. Gardevoir is a staple of many Hoenn teams, and Route 102 is the only place to get Ralts. I do personally think Alakazam is a bit better though, but Abra is only available before the first gym in Emerald, found on Route 116. It's a tough call for sure, but I think despite the Blaziken overlap, I have to say that Slackoth is the best to catch, so you can trade it for Makit the Makuhita. Hariyama is simply fantastic, and even if you pick Torchic, having it on your team for the Norman battle will be huge, since you'll still only have Combuskin at that point. Also, Blaziken cannot learn Belly Drum, which is one of my favorite moves. Belly Drum maxes your attack stat to +6 in exchange for having HP, and if you just potion it back up, Hariyama can now sweep most anything. That's just in Ruby and Sapphire though. In Emerald, my choice is Abra, so you have a strong, fast psychic type for the sometimes challenging Brawly battle. I chose it over Ralts because you can have Kadabra with base 120 special attack and 105 speed at just level 16. Ralts doesn't evolve to Kirlia until level 20, and Kirlia's base stat total is only 278. Next is Fire Red and Leaf Green. And while my priority is the same, ensuring you have a way to beat Brock even if you choose Charmander, my choice is not the same. That is because Onix actually has a rock move now, and it will hit Butterfree so hard that it might actually squash it. However, while Butterfree was nerfed, the runner-up was actually buffed to the point of being the new winner. That Pokemon is Mankey. Mankey is found on Route 22 still, and now resists the rock move that Onix will use. But more importantly, the fighting move it has is Low Kick. This is the same as before, but in Gen 1, Low Kick was a 50 power move with 90% accuracy and a 30% chance to flinch. Not awful, but not stellar against a massive defense Onix. But starting in Gen 3, Low Kick's power changes based on the target's weight. Onix weighs 463 pounds, which means Low Kick is 120 base power against it. That is an insanely strong move with no drawbacks. Primeape is not great long term, there's no Rage Fist Annihilate, and fighting isn't that great in Kanto anyways, but if you need help getting past the Rock Snake wall, then Low Kick Mankey is a great way to do that. Also, I should note that while in a previous video I named Nidoking the best Fire Red Leaf Green team member and Nidoran Male does learn Double Kick, you cannot get it before Brock like you could in Gen 1. So it was never a contestant for Gen 3 in this video. Next is Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. And this is the easiest choice so far. Most Pokemon games feature an early route normal type, an early route bug, and a regional bird. Prior to Sinnoh, all of those were underwhelming at best, at least in the long term. Then Sinnoh added Starly. Starly is found on the literal first route of the game and evolves at the pleasantly low level of just 14. As Staravia, it gets Intimidate, one of the best abilities in the game. Then it becomes Staraptor with base 100 speed and 120 attack, and access to the incredible move close combat. Even without stab, this move is so strong on such a strong Pokemon that you can get away with not even having a fighting type on your team. With the combo of flying offense and close combat, your little Starly can go on to excel in the Grass Gym, Fighting Gym, Steel Gym, Ice Gym, and Bug Elite 4. Plus, you need a flyer on your team anyways. This is still the era of HMs, and not having access to fly at all times is super annoying. And Staraptor is one of the best flyers ever made. If you're not using Staraptor in Sinnoh, you're either doing something wrong or are choosing not to for variety or a challenge. It's the best team member outside your starter, and it just happens to be found on the first route of the game. Next is Heart Gold and Soul Silver, and there's been a big change from Gen 2. Mareep is now obtainable before Falkner. This gives you an electric type for the Flying Gym and Bugsy's Scyther. Onix got some buffs too though. It now gets Rock Throw sooner, and Steelix doesn't need a TM for Iron Tail. Both are really useful and worthy team members, but I'm gonna keep Rocky the Onix, or for getting technical, the Bellsprout you need to trade for it, as the winner. Assuming you're willing to get a Metal Coat from a Wild Magnemite and then trade Evolve it. I know it's very annoying, but I will deal with annoyances for power.
By the way, if you're playing any of these games on a modern day emulator, you can get rid of trait evolutions with a feature of the Universal Randomizer.
Anyways, while the Mareep line is good against Gym 1 and 2, it's hit much harder by Miltank. Meanwhile, Onix is a really strong wall against all of the first 3 gyms, and will have stab super effective damage for the first 2. And then Steelix is just simply so powerful, extremely strong, and hard to kill. Also, again, Rocky is an in-game trade. Boosted experience is a pretty big deal. Next is Black and White. No other Pokemon game has fewer pre-Gym 1 Pokemon. It's actually insane. There are so few that I will name all of them right now. You can get your starter, Patrat, Lillipup, Purloin, and the Elemental Monkey, weak to your starter, but strong against the gym. That's it. That's the whole list. You cannot make a full team of 6 Pokemon without doubling up on species. This is especially brutal considering that the Striaton Gym will always be strong against your starter. Therefore, the best first Pokemon to catch is whichever monkey you get. You don't technically catch it, it's a gift, but like, catch can be a synonym for obtain. Pansage, Pansear, and Panpour are the winners for the sole reason that they can help you just get past the first gym and start building an actual team. I do not care if you never use them again, just monkey your way out of this early game prison. Black 2 and White 2 provide significantly more options, but unfortunately none of them really impress me. Riolu is found in Flockacy Ranch, and thanks to its fighting type, it is seemingly strong against the first gym, which is normal. Steel Fighting Lucario is certainly very useful once you can get it evolved. However, for Riolu to get a fighting move, you have to out-level the first gym, so it's only somewhat helpful, and then you have 2 back-to-back gyms that resist fighting. Plus, it overlaps with Pignite. Mareep is a solid electric type, but you don't need electric for the first gym, and the Verbank complex right after has Magnemite, which I think is better. I'm not thrilled about it, but my pick is Riolu. It will be a good team member for 2 of the starters, and still a solid one if you pick Tepig, since despite their overlap in fighting, Lucario and Emboar's only weakness overlap is ground. The friendship evolution could be annoying, but leveling up is the most effective friendship booster, so catching Riolu at such a low level should speed up that process. Next is X and Y, and a runner-up I want to mention is Bunnelby to do a trade in Santaloon for a Farfetch'd named Quacklin. That's fantastic. Quacklin will dog walk the first gym, the Bug Gym, but its usefulness falls off pretty quickly after that. Farfetch'd is, after all, a very terrible Pokemon. My pick for the winner is actually Riolu again. It's found on Route 22, just east of Santaloon City, and while it won't be any help in the first gym, you can begin the process of boosting its friendship at level 6 or 7. Grant, the Rock Leader, isn't until level 25, so you might have a Steel Fighting Lucario for the second gym. And then, of course, Mega Lucario. I won't go into too much detail about this. I discussed it in my best gift Pokemon in every game video, so you can just watch that. But in short, Mega Lucario is the most broken playthrough Pokemon ever. Its stats and typing and ability simply destroy everything it comes up against. Now you could of course just use the gift Lucario that Karina gives you, but if you catch Riolu early, you can use it for Grant. Additionally, while Lucario overlaps with Chestnut's fighting type, you won't have a Chestnut for Grant. And in their final forms, they only share a weakness to fire. Next is Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. Gardevoir is better now thanks to Fairy, but the types that Fairy is good against that are not already weak to Psychic, those being Dark and Dragon, are not until the League. Additionally, Abra is after the first gym again, so it cannot win like it did in Emerald. Therefore, my winner is the same as Ruby and Sapphire. Slackoth, so you can trade it for Machit the Makuhita, which was actually buffed. Gen 3 Machit had poor IVs and a neutral nature, but Gen 6 Machit has a perfect attack IV and an attack boosting nature. Also, Hariyama now gets Belly Drum at only level 26. Even if you plan to move on from it once you have Blaziken, this boosted experience Hariyama is simply too good. Also, quick tangent before we move on to the next game, I discovered something while writing this section that I absolutely must tell you about. In every game since the move was introduced, Hariyama has Brine as a level 1 move. This confused me when I saw it because Brine is a special water attack, and every other Pokemon that learns it is water type, at least partially aquatic, or Mew, which learns all TM moves. So why does Hariyama get it in its level up Sweat? It's Sweat. Sweat is salt water, and thus brine. Hariyama sweats so much that it can literally damage foes with it. That is as funny as it is disgusting. Next is Sun and Moon, which of course do not have gyms, so instead I'm looking at Pokemon obtainable before the first major battle, the Totem Gumshoos or Alolan Raticate. There are a lot of options, but I don't really think any of them are exceptional. Some are good for the Totem, but not for Hala, or vice versa, and others are solid Pokemon, but overlap with starters and don't really shine until later. Therefore, I think the best Pokemon is one that is all around good, doesn't overlap starters, and has good matchups against both some early game battles and some later ones. And my pick is... Peck. You see what I did there? Peck is another regional bird, and thus caught very early, on the first route of the game. And the line is good because it evolves quickly, into Trumbeak at just 14, and to Cannon at just 28. While they are unfortunately quite slow, you can kinda get around that with early access to the Quick Claw, and then you can enjoy their high attack. Toucannon's is 120. They also have a good ability. If you get one with Skill Link, which maxes the number of hits for multi-hit moves, that gives you Stab Fury attack that will be 75 power plus Stab, assuming it doesn't miss, along with 125 power Bullet Seed later, and eventually Rock Blast from the Move Tutor. It also has a surprisingly wide move pool of physical coverage moves. I also selected it because Flying's a generally good type in Alola. And everywhere else, go Team Sky! Hala is the immediate good matchup, and you should have Trumbeak by that point, but then it goes on to help with the Grass Trial, Guzma's Bugs, the Totem Kamo-O, and Hala again in the league. Additionally, Toucannon's normal flying typing is defensively good against the Ghost Trial and Hapu's ground types. It's not outrageously amazing, but it's a solid team member that you can get very early. Things are very different in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon though. A bunch of new Pokemon were added, expanding your options even more, but one of them in particular is actually insane. The first Pokemon you should catch is Spearow on Route 2. But just so you can do another in-game trade. I know there's a lot of these in this video, but a lot of them are good. In the Route 2 Pokemon Center, a girl would like a Spearow in exchange for a freaking Hawlucha! Yes! Hawlucha! A Pokemon with a base stat total of 500 before the first fight of the game. And that first battle is weak to fighting. And then the second is weak to flying. Hawlucha can solo the first two boss fights of the game. but it goes so much farther than that. Cha, I realize I didn't mention, that is the name of this awesome Hawlucha, has an offensive advantage against the Totem Araquanid, Totem Lurantis, Olivia's Rock types, the Totem Togedemaru, Guzma's Bug types, Nanu's Dark types, the Totem Kameo, the Totem Rabambi, and Malaine and Olivia in the league. It is defensively weak to some of those, like it is weak to Electric and also Rock, but still, that's most of the fights in the game! You can catch Wild Hawlucha on Route 3, but Cha is better because you can use it for the Totem Gumshoe's Eradicate, it gets boosted experience, and it has a perfect attack IV and an attack boosting nature. Cha the Hawlucha is easily the best Pokemon for an Ultra Alola team, and I think it is very weird that this girl wanted to get rid of him. What, for a Spearow? That is a much worse bird. Next is Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, which changed the Kanto games a lot more than just adding janky motion controls. For one, you start with either Pikachu or Eevee, but they're much more powerful than normal ones, and they have double kick for Brock. Also, the early game spawns have changed somewhat. This is made apparent by the fact that the gym attendant won't even let you into the gym if you don't have a grass or water type in your party. Yeah, clearly the difficulty is quite a bit lower now. This quest wouldn't actually be possible in the older games unless you started with Bulbasaur or Squirtle. It's also odd that he says grass or water because there are no wild water types before Gym 1. So you need a grass type. This works pretty well though actually, since grass will be useful for both Brock and Misty. But which grass type to pick? Let's Go Pikachu only has Oddish, while Let's Go Eevee only has Bellsprout, but neither of these matter here, because the best option is by far Bulbasaur. Bulbasaur is now found wild in Viridian Forest as a special spawn, meaning it is almost impossible to find without a catch combo, but it spawns quite consistently if you have one at about 11. All right, so I guess it's probably not gonna be the first one you like actually catch, but it's the first one you're gonna use, and that's close enough. Bulbasaur is already considered the best starter in the older Kanto games, so of course it's still a spectacular team member when you can get it just slightly later. It beats Brock, Misty, and Giovanni, both outside and inside his gym, and it's defensively strong against Lieutenant Surge and Erica. Plus, now that Fairy exists, its poison type will be useful for any you run into. As icing on the cake, you'll want an original Kanto starter on your team in general, because after beating Blaine, you get the Mega Stones for Venusaur, Charizard, and Blastoise, meaning Mega Venusaur for Gym 8 and the League. Next is Sword and Shield, which are, frankly, insane. Let's first address the Caparaja in the room, Dynamax Adventures. I've explained this before, so I'll try to keep it brief. If you have the DLC, you can go to the Crown Tundra, lose the battle to Peony, go to the Max Lair, run through a Dynamax adventure using rental Pokemon, catch a level 70 Suicune, since this feature bypasses the catch level limit, and steamroll the entire game with it. So technically, Suicune would be the best first Pokemon to catch. But what if you don't have the DLC, or you don't want to break the game? Then you have an absurd amount of options. Before the first gym, there's routes 1 through 4, the Slumbering Weld, Galar Mine number 1, and the entire wild area. Okay, not the entire wild area. A lot of the places don't spawn Pokemon weak enough for you to catch without having a gym badge. But like, still the spawns change every day. There are the lasers, like it's so much. All in all, there's like 70 different Pokemon you can get before Gym 1. So how am I possibly going to choose the best one? Well, it's actually quite simple. You see, you just get something that you can get really, really early. That's really good. And it's Rookidee. Rookidee can actually be the literal first Pokemon you catch on Route 1, and it is yet another stellar regional bird. Flying is great early, since the first gym is grass, the third has a bug type, and if you're playing Sword, the fourth is fighting type. But in addition to this, Rookidee has a strategy that is one of the most impressive that I've ever seen. Rookidee gets Power Trip at just level 4, a dark move that's only 20 power, but gains 20 power for each positive stat boost the user has. It's a physical dark type stored power. This move works great on Pokemon that can boost their own stats, and just 4 levels later, Rookidee gets Hone Claws, boosting its attack and accuracy by 1 stage each. So if you use Hone Claws twice, Power Trip is now 100 power. And since you're at +2 attack, it's effectively 200 power. Only Pokemon that resist Dark can really survive it, and if it's weak to Dark, like Beed's Pokemon are, then you can sweep through him with just 1 Hone Claws. And that's just the early game. Rookidee eventually becomes Corviknight, which gains Steel and ends up with incredible typing. Only weak to Fire and Electric, while having 8 resistances and 2 immunities. If you evolve it before Opal's Gym, it can beat the Fairy Gym, Rock Gym, and Ice Gym while being immune to Raihan's Sandstorm. Plus, it's a Steel type. Even if it's not offensively strong, there's a high chance it's gonna resist all of your opponent's moves. So Rookidee wins without the DLC, Suicune with it. But Rookidee wins no matter what, in my heart. Next is Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl, which I'll keep short. It's Starly again. The changes from Gen 4 are so minimal that it doesn't affect my answer. Then we have Legends Arceus. And as I've said before, I don't think the team you use really matters that much. Most of the major combat is dodge, roll, and try not to die. So I'm simply picking a Pokemon to help you get through the early game, that being Buizel. It's the most accessible early water type, and the Noble Cleavor is weak to water. Even if you picked Oshawott, it'll be nice to have a backup. Finally is Scarlet and Violet, where your options are the entire game. It's open world, and the gyms can be done in any order. So, oh God. I'm just kidding. There's actually a pretty straightforward solution to this. I'm just looking at Pokemon in the areas before Mesa Goza, specifically South Province Area 1. This is before you can ride Koraidon or Miraidon, and it's a true tutorial area. While some of the Pokemon here will be strong eventually, most are pretty weak to start out, like Azurill or Igglybuff or Wooper. But there is one Pokemon that is outrageously powerful from the very beginning. Flamigo. Flamigo has a base stat total of 500 with a base speed of 90 and a base attack of 115. And you can get it as low as level 4. By level 12, it'll have stab moves for both of its types, and like we saw with Hawlucha, flying and fighting just so happens to be an amazing offensive combo. If you didn't notice, most of the Pokemon I've selected in this video have been flying type, fighting type, or both. Together, fighting and flying beat the first 2 gyms, 2 of the first 3 Titans, and the first Team Star Camp. Flamigo bodies the early game with fully evolved stats, while most Pokemon won't be anywhere close to that. And after that, it excels in the normal gym, both ground Titans, since Great Tusk is weak to flying and Iron Treads is weak to fighting, the Ice Gym, and the Fighting Team Star Camp. If you get one with Scrappy, it can even help in the Ghost Gym. And yes, it does eventually overlap with Quaquaval, but Quaxley doesn't get fighting until its final form. Even if you pick Quaxley and ditch Flamigo later, Flamigo is so fantastic in the early game that passing it up would be a mistake. The 10 pseudo-legendary Pokemon are very powerful in their final forms, but they can require a lot of work to raise. Therefore, in games with more than one, you're gonna wanna make sure you make the right choice. Here are my picks for the best pseudo-legendary Pokemon in every mainline Pokemon game. Let's first clear out all the games with only one pseudo-legend available before the Pokemon League, making these the best pseudos by default. If you're wondering why Gold, Silver, and Crystal are here despite Tyranitar existing, that's because Larvitar is only available in the outrageously endgame Mount Silver, and only at a maximum level of 20! Unhinged! Crystal did technically add it in the Celadon Game Corner, but that is still post-game. And then in the Hoenn games, Beldum is a post-league gift from Steven, so there's still only Bagon before the league. The first games to make more than one pseudo-line obtainable pre-league are Heart Gold and Soul Silver, which made Larvitar obtainable sooner. This was done via the new Johto Safari Zone, which made it so many of the Johto Pokemon that were weirdly only post-game in Gen 2, like Murkrow and Mischievous, can now be obtained much sooner. Larvitar is one of those, found in the Mountain Zone. However, it could be annoying to get. This Safari Zone is customizable, but only half of the default area layouts actually include the Mountain Zone. And to unlock the ability to edit them, you have to catch a Geodude, show it to Baoba, then wait 3 gameplay hours for him to call you, and then let you edit the layout. You could also have access to it immediately. You can go to the Safari Zone once you've healed Amphi in the Lighthouse, which is significantly sooner than Dratini, which will still require you to wait until the Dragon's Den after beating Claire. This Larvitar, then Pupitar, is strong but risky against Jasmine and Price, being offensively good with ground or rock, but also weak to their specialties. It matches up incredibly against Silver in all the subsequent battles though, with 3 of his Pokemon weak to rock or ground, and maybe even a 4th if he uses Typhlosion. And then of course ground is good against so many Team Rocket Pokemon because they use a ton of poison types. And all of this is before the Claire fight, which you have to beat to get Dratini. Dratini is also obtained at far too low a level to not be a massive pain to deal with, and even then, it's not that great in the league. You'd have to over-level it to 55 for it to have any chance against Lance. Pupitar is also not that powerful, of course, and it will also not evolve until 55, but so many league Pokemon are weak to rock and ground. If you were to over-level it to 55 and evolve it to Tyranitar, it could probably beat every league member but Bruno by itself. Therefore, Tyranitar is Gen 4 Johto's best pseudo. We then jump past Black and White with only Hydreigon to get to Black 2 and White 2, which add 2 other pseudo lines to the regional decks, Metagross and Tyranitar. However, this is a deception. Pupitar, and actually Tyranitar too, are only found on Route 15, the one with the Poke Transfer Lab, and thus are not actually obtainable until post-game, because you can't go to that route until post-game. See, I know why they did this similar thing in Hoenn. Metagross was a brand new Pokemon. They wanted Steven to have the never before seen until that moment Metagross, and then it's like, okay, now that you've seen Metagross, you can get your own. But with Tyranitar in Black 2 and White 2, not only is it not new, but also there's no major characters that use it. I don't understand why it's in the Black 2, White 2 Unova decks at all. Some with the Dream World? Maybe? I have no idea. The end result is that Hydreigon and Metagross are the only candidates, and both are obtained quite late. Zweilous is caught in the Victory Road, while Metang is found in the Giant Chasm Crater Forest, accessible only once you have 8 badges. However, Metang being slightly earlier means you can use it for the climactic Team Plasma battles, including Zinzalin, Colress, Kyurem, and Ghetsis. It is most useful against Zinzalin's ice types, including Weavile, since in Gen 5, Steel still resisted Dark. Hydreigon has the edge in the league though. Metagross's Psychic offense really only helps against Marshall, and the only league Pokemon weak to Steel is Iris's Archeops. Meanwhile, Hydreigon's Dark typing is great against Chantal and Caitlyn, then its Dragon typing helps against Iris's own dragons. It also doesn't have the 4x Fairy weakness to worry about in this gen. Hydreigon would be great in the league. Would being the crucial word there, because you won't have Hydreigon in the league due to its immoral evolution level of 64, the highest in all of Pokemon to this day. 64 is 5 levels higher than Iris's strongest Pokemon, and this is the case despite Iris herself having a level 57 Hydreigon, and then Ghetsis having one as low as 52 earlier. So yes, Zweilous will have the same type matchups as Hydreigon. It's as weak as a middle stage starter, not a legend level pseudo. Unova's evolution levels are scars upon otherwise great games. But then on the complete flip side, Metang's middle to final evolution level is tied with Hakamo-o for the earliest of all the pseudos at only 45. Metang is caught in Crater Forest at a minimum of level 45, meaning it evolves instantly. Plus, even though it's not as offensively useful in the league, it's still a frickin' Steel-type pseudo that at this point is not weak to Dark or Ghost. Metagross is easily the superior pseudo in Black 2 and White 2. Just keep in mind, it's gonna be as hard to catch as a full-blown legendary due to that pesky catch rate of 3 that they gave it. And I still don't understand why they did that. Next is X and Y, and this is where things kind of blow up. Up to now, no game has had more than 2 lines available pre-league. X and Y have 6. Wait, hold on one moment. Oh, really? Okay, well, I'll let them know. Thank you. Okay, correction. Y has 6, X has 5. The Tyranitar line is a Y exclusive, and its counterpart in X is the Aggron line, which doesn't feel fair. Aggron looks the part of a pseudo, but it is significantly weaker. I should also note that while both Garchomp and Tyranitar have Mega Evolutions in these games, while the others do not, their Mega Stones are not obtainable until post-game, so all the pseudos are even footing in this regard. Where the pseudos vary wildly is how early you can obtain them. Hydreigon is the latest, surprise, with Zweilous again available only in the Victory Road. But the league is higher level, so you can have it fully evolved for that. Fun fact, you can actually catch a wild Hydreigon swooping down at you lower than level 64. So maybe Iris and Getsis were not cheating, although this Hydreigon is still higher level than theirs. The next latest are Dratini and Dragonair, found on Route 21, just west of Snowbell. These late locations immediately eliminate Hydreigon and Dragonite in my opinion. If either of them excelled in the league, maybe I'd consider it, but they're really only strong against Drasna and a couple of Dianthus Pokemon. Then we have Larvitar and Pupitar being found on Route 18 and Terminus Cave right after defeating Team Flare. Tyranitar is great against Wolfric, but then really only good against Malva after that. Goomy is caught on Route 14 between the 5th and 6th badges, but Pure Dragon is either terrible or neutral against the 3 gyms it can face. Salamence actually has the same problem. Bagon is found by far the earliest on Route 8 before even the 2nd gym, but you won't have Salamence's flying type until after you've won the battles weak to flying. But the Garchomp line doesn't have the Pure Dragon problem, because it's a ground type the whole time. Gible is found on Route 13, the Lumiose Badlands, right after the 4th gym. It will evolve instantly into Gabite, then once you teach it Dig from the TM, you have your ground type for the Electric gym. It can also take down Valerie's Steel-type Mawile, which does not actually know a fairy move, which was a strange decision. It's the Fairy Gym. It then evolves at level 48, the 2nd lowest level for a pseudo's final form, and it will learn Crunch, which you can use for Olympia. It has a bit of a rougher patch after that, but then in the league, it excels against Wickstrom and Malva, the only pseudo to do well against 2 Elite Four members. And then half of Dianthus' team is weak to either ground or dragon. Garchomp wins X and Y in a sand slide. Next is Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, and I do need to acknowledge something big up front: the Shiny Gift Beldum. This event ran for the first few months after release, distributing a shiny Beldum holding the Metagrossite. If you got this Beldum, it is the best by like 100 miles. It's the only one you can play through the whole game with. It also starts out knowing Iron Head and Zen Headbutt, while Beldum normally starts out only knowing Takedown. And then on top of all of that, it comes with the Metagrossite, allowing you to use Mega Metagross, which normally you cannot use until after you've beaten the league twice. However, this event ended over a decade ago. Yeesh. So I need a permanent answer. Beldum is still a post-game gift, so you might think Salamence is the answer by default, but it may not be. That's because Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire did something unusual. They give you the national dex before the league. In fact, it's even before fighting the last gym. This makes some pseudo-legendaries obtainable even before Bagon because they don't actually require Waterfall to get to. There are 2 national dex pseudos: Gible as a hidden Pokemon in the Route 111 Desert, and Dino as a hidden Pokemon in Meteor Falls. I should acknowledge that Gible is found unfortunately only at level 23, while Bagon and Dino can be found up to level 40 if you wait until having Waterfall. Considering that none of these are that good against Wallace, I recommend just doing that anyways. Hydreigon is sadly again screwed by its evolution level, forcing you to outlevel the entire league by 5 levels just to reach its final form. For this reason, I'm disqualifying it. So it comes down to just Salamence versus Garchomp. Salamence's Mega Stone is after the Delta episode, and Garchomp's requires you to get Platinum rank in your secret base, which you do by capturing 1,000 flags from other players' secret bases? Let's just assume you can't Mega Evolve either of them. Both of these will be fully evolved by the Victory Road. Salamence beats 3 of Wally's Pokemon, while Garchomp beats 2. Then in the league, both are neutral against Phoebe, should not fight Glacia, and are strong but of course risky against Drake. Salamence beats Sydney's 2 grass types, but has no super effective stab against Steven. Meanwhile, Garchomp's ground stab is great for Aggron and Metagross. It's very close, and both would be very good. But since Garchomp matches up well against Steven's Mega Metagross, the strongest trainer Pokemon in the game at this point, I'm giving the edge to Garchomp. But if you want to do less training, since Gible is found at a lower level than Bagon, Salamence is nearly as good for less work. Next is Sun and Moon, and their regional decks feature Salamence, Goodra, Metagross, Garchomp, Dragonite, and of course the new Kamo-O. However, Dino can be island scanned in 10 Carat Hill on Tuesdays, so the Tyranitar line is the only one you cannot get. With so many options, this decision's gonna be quite challenging. Except actually it's not. Bagon is found on Route 3 before fighting Hala, and thus the earliest of the options. Now some of you might be thinking, wait, why are you bringing up Bagon? Back in the X and Y segment, you said that Bagon and Shelgon's pure dragon typing wasn't that great. It's because I don't actually plan to catch Bagon. Sun and Moon have a mechanic called SOS battles, where a hurt Pokemon can call in another Pokemon to help. Most of the time, the arriving Pokemon is the same species as the original, but in certain cases, different ones will show up. This is actually required to get other pseudos, Goomy and Gabite, since they only appear as SOS partners during Rain or Sandstorm, respectively. I bring this up because Bagon on Route 3, absurdly, have a small chance to call in wild Salamence, ranging from levels 9 to 12. I take back all my criticism of Iris and Getsis. Clearly, they just found the right SOS spot. As for how Salamence's typing matches up against the major battles of the game, it does not matter. You will have a Salamence 40 levels before you're supposed to. This is a 600 base stat total Pokemon against Hala's Crabrawler, which has a base stat total of 338. Now, you will unfortunately have to wait a while for a flying type move since it won't know its normally Evo move Fly, but this is still clearly worth it. This thing gets Dragon Claw at level 29. Just kill everything with that. I will warn you though, this is likely to take quite a bit of time. Bagon is only a 1% chance encounter, and then Salamence is similarly rare to be called in. But if you put in the work, you will have one of the most broken playthrough Pokemon ever. Not the most broken, we'll get to that in a minute, but still, outrageously good. Pun intended. Outrage, you understand? Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon made some slight changes to encounter locations, and then a bigger change by removing the Dino line completely and putting Larvitar in Diglett's tunnel. But none of that matters. The SOS Salamence is still available, so that is still the best pseudo. By the way, if you've watched this far into the video, you probably enjoy what I do here, so I would really appreciate it if you took a moment to subscribe, or double check if you're subscribed if you think you might be. It sends a signal to the YouTube algorithm, basically saying, hello, send me more of this man's stuff, please. We skip over Let's Go with only Dragonite and move to Sword and Shield, where things start to get exceptionally complicated due to the wild area, raids, and DLC. I should note in these every game videos, for the DLC having games, I always give one answer with the DLC and one answer without, so we will start by ignoring the DLC. Both Sword and Shield have the new Dreepy line, of course, but before the DLC, all of the remaining available pseudos are version exclusive. Sword has the Dino and Jangmo-O lines, while Shield has the Larvitar and Goomy lines. So each game actually only has 3 choices. Every single one of these lines can either be obtained at the Lake of Outrage in the wild area or in a max raid battle, with the exception of the cool big wandering Kamo-O or Tyranitar in the Dusty Bowl. In short, unless you get lucky with a raid battle, all of these cannot be obtained until you can surf with your bike after getting 6 badges. Because the raid dens are just way too unpredictable, I think it's the most fair if I base my decision on just the Lake of Outrage spawns, which are gonna be a lot more reliable. Reliable still being a stretch because they're still weather dependent and rare. The sword pool of Kamo-O, Hydreigon, and Dragapult immediately has a standout due to evolution levels. If you recall, Kamo-O is tied with Metagross for the lowest final form evolution level, only 45. That means the level 50 to 52 Pokemon you catch at the lake will evolve instantly. Meanwhile, we know Hydreigon's awful evolution level, and Dragapult's is actually only slightly better. It's all the way up at 60. Kamo-O has another perk over the other two. It matches up great against several of the upcoming late game battles thanks to its dragon and fighting combo. Piers, Raihan, Marnie, Sum of Hop, Raihan again, and Chairman Rose. Dragapult and Hydreigon are much worse, since Dark and Ghost really only excel against Alistair, who is only in Shield. And we are in Sword. Kamo-O is the clear best pseudo in Sword, but what about Shield? None of the options, Dragapult, Tyranitar, and Goodra, are as good as Kamo-O. Dragapult can do well against Alistair, who you actually fight in this game, but it will still be a Dracloak at the time. Goodra's Pure Dragon is, again, a bit disappointing, but then Tyranitar does somewhat better, though. It's of course great against Alistair thanks to its dark typing, and then it has some specific one-on-one matchups that it does well against. The big one being Leon's Charizard. Obviously, Charizard is 4 times weak to rock, but it does have max overgrowth, which Tyranitar is weak to. However, it's a special move that's only 2 times super effective, and Tyranitar is very bulky and made bulkier by its own Sand's special defense boost. It should easily survive and KO with a rock move. Because of the Alistair and Leon matchup, Tyranitar wins Shield. But then what happens when we add the DLC? No new pseudos were added in the Isle of Armor, while the Crown Tundra added Salamence for Sword, Garchomp for Shield, and Dragonite and Metagross for both, making it so between the 2 games, including the DLC, all pseudos at the time were obtainable. Now, I could tell you approximately how early you can get all of the new ones, but none of it matters. There is a quirk in the Sword and Shield DLC that I missed in my earliest Legendary in Every Game video last year, and that error still haunts me to this day. So I am not missing it this time. Once you've gone through the opening ceremonies at Motostoke, you can travel to the Isle of Armor and Crown Tundra. Normally, the Crown Tundra is mostly off limits, since the wild Pokemon do not scale down. They're all in the 60s or higher, and thus totally uncatchable this early. You also have to battle Peony immediately, who has very high level Pokemon and will destroy you. But you don't have to win. Once you lose to him, the plot just keeps progressing. So after the conversation is over, you can beeline to the Dynamax Adventures, the feature where you use rental Pokemon to do several raid battles in a row, culminating in a legendary fight. The first run you do always ends with Suicune. After the run, you can keep one of the Pokemon you obtained, and crucially, they are all set at level 65, or 70 in the case of Legends. And since they're not traded Pokemon, they will obey you. Pokemon you caught yourself didn't start disobeying you if caught at too high of a level until Legends Arceus. This means you can basically start the game with an insanely overleveled Pokemon that has no drawbacks. It is wild that you can do this. Most of the time people, especially speedrunners, grab the level 70 Suicune and go with that. But there are some rental pseudos you can get as well. Dragonair, Metang, and Dracloak, the non-version exclusives. Since they're obtained at level 65, they'll all evolve instantly. Therefore, these are tied for the best pseudos in DLC Sword and Shield, because who cares about their type matchups? They're as strong as the champion before the first badge. Now, I should say you'll probably spend ages trying to find one of these specific 3 Pokemon, so if you want to just beat the game fast, get the Suicune and go with that. However, if one shows up, it's the best pseudo, technically. Next, we skip BDSP that only has Garchomp before the league and move to Legends Arceus, which features Garchomp, of course, plus the new Hisuian Goodra, now a Dragon Steel type. I'm of the opinion that the exact team you use in Legends Arceus doesn't really matter that much, because the most important big battles are not like regular Pokemon battles. They are try not to die while throwing bags. I personally think Hisuian Goodra is better here for 2 reasons. The first is that Dragon Steel typing is simply fantastic, with so many resistances and only 2 weaknesses. Secondly, you can get it quite a bit sooner. Gumi can be found as early as the Crimson Mirelands, the second area you can go to, while the Gible line is not until the Highlands, the fourth area. The Mirelands also have the Alpha Hisuian Sliggoo, which you can evolve immediately, which is what I used on my team. Finally is Scarlet and Violet. With the DLC, every pseudo is obtainable between the two versions. All but Metagross and Kammo-o are in the base game. Tyranitar and Hydreigon are Scarlet exclusive, while Salamence and Dragapult are Violet exclusive. With the totally open world, raids, DLC, and having a major battle against, I believe, basically every type by the end of the game, this decision is super complicated, so I'm gonna uncomplicate it and just say that it's Garchomp. It reaches its final form at level 48. And the only other pseudos that do so sooner are DLC exclusive Kammo-o and Metagross. Ground is a very useful secondary typing, hitting 5 types for super effective damage. If you have the DLC, Kammo-o's fighting type is also quite useful, and it reaches its final form a little sooner, but it doesn't hit its middle form until level 35. 11 levels later than Gible evolves into Gabite. The only pseudo to hit their middle stage sooner is Beldum into Metang, but Beldum is only at Blueberry Academy, which you cannot access at the start of the game. All of them will be strong team members, especially those that do not evolve stupid late. Sorry, Hydreigon, but because of the Garchomp line's all-around usefulness and easier accessibility, I think it's the best regardless of whether you have the DLC or not. Who doesn't love free stuff? Gift Pokemon, where you get a Pokemon or egg pretty much totally for free, have been present in every mainline game since the beginning. And today I'll be determining which gift Pokemon I believe is the best in every mainline Pokemon game. We'll start with Red and Blue, and Bulbapedia lists the gift Pokemon as the starters, the $500 Magikarp, the Celadon Eevee, Hitmonlee or Hitmonchan in the dojo, Lapras in Silphco, and the fossils. However, that's not the list I'm going with. I have some clarifications to make. First, I have 2 important exclusions that will apply throughout the entire video. The first is starter Pokemon. They are technically gifts, but if I include them, then the best gift Pokemon in every game is just the best starter Pokemon in every game, which is a separate concept that I've already covered, so it'd be lame to just repeat that and make this a best starters video. And then the second exclusion is just all fossil Pokemon, because it's a mess. Sure, some fossils are gifted to you directly, like the Old Amber, but others like the Helix and Dome fossils, you just find on the ground. Bulbapedia credits the Reviver Scientist as the one gifting you the Pokemon, but are they really gifting you the Pokemon when you hand them the fossil and then they just come back with it as a Pokemon? Like, it was your fossil to begin with. They're not gifting you a Pokemon, they're gifting you a service. Additionally, Bulbapedia's page on gift Pokemon sometimes includes fossils, but sometimes doesn't, even in the same region with the same obtainment method. It lists Anorith and Lileep in Gen 3, but not Gen 6, and I do not know why. It's simply too annoying to parse through this, and trying to divide them up based on whether the fossil is physically handed to you or found in the dirt would just get too confusing. So for simplicity's sake, all fossil revived Pokemon are just excluded from this video. They might get their own video later though. I am also excluding the $500 Magikarp. It's very clearly a purchase, not a gift. And I think it's weird that Bulbapedia included that on the list of gift Pokemon, but not all of the Game Corner Pokemon. Like, all of those are also purchased, just with a different currency. Eevee doesn't have anyone give you the Pokemon directly, but I'm still including it because you don't pay for it. In fact, you might actually steal it. It's just sitting on a table and then you grab it and go. But you're not handing over a fossil or any money or Pokemon of your own. So I think it's fine. The guy in the room doesn't stop you, so I'm counting it as a gift from him or the universe. But to evaluate the remaining Pokemon, Hitmonlee and Hitmonchan are respectable options, but the fighting type simply is not good in Gen 1. There's no Dark or Steel type, no normal specialist, and the Rock Gym is done, leaving only Ice that it's strong against. Fighting is far from useless, but it really only shines against a few of Giovanni's Pokemon, and then half of Lorelei's team. The top 2 contenders are the Eevee and the Lapras. Lapras is one of, if not the, best water types in the game because it's also ice type. Well, that, and it also has like good stats and good move pool, unlike the other water ice type Pokemon. Ice is scarce and very helpful against Lance, and Lapras is the only ice type to get Ice Beam at a reasonable level, only at 38. Water also shines well late game, since the final 2 gym leaders are Fire and Ground. And then of course, Eevee is incredibly versatile. You can immediately evolve it into one of 3 different Pokemon, depending on your team needs. Sure, some are better than others. See my best evolution in every game video. But it's nice because even if you chose Charmander or Squirtle, you can simply turn Eevee into the type you aren't using. Both are very useful Pokemon, but there is a clear winner due to the factor of not hating your life. Eevee is obtained at level 25 as soon as you get to Celadon, which is around the level your team would be upon arrival. And then you can evolve it immediately by purchasing a stone at the store. Meanwhile, Lapras is obtained significantly later, requiring you to defeat Blue and Silphco, and his team is almost to level 40. But it's not just that Lapras comes later, it's the fact that you get it at level 15. What? Your team is like level 40. Why is it 25 levels lower? Training up Lapras becomes a giant chore, so because of that, Eevee is the clear winner in red and blue. But in yellow, things aren't quite the same. All the red and blue gift Pokemon are present, but since you start with Pikachu instead, the original starter trio become offered as gift Pokemon at different places throughout the game. Bulbasaur in Cerulean, Charmander just north of Nugget Bridge, and Squirtle in Vermilion, although after getting the Vermilion City badge. To clarify, when I said I was excluding starter Pokemon, it's starter Pokemon that you like actually start your journey with. If that category of Pokemon is obtainable later, it's fair game, with one notable exception that I will get to later. These 3 are now the earliest gift Pokemon in the game, which is a massive perk. The sooner you get Pokemon, the more use you get out of them. All 3 are strong candidates, but Bulbasaur is far and away the best. It's already the best Kanto starter, and it remains that despite missing the Rock Gym. It still gets to help with Misty, resisting Lieutenant Surge, and Giovanni down the line. Plus, I now know about the Toxic Leech Seed damage stacking strategy, and Venusaur gets both of those moves. Bulbasaur is the best yellow gift Pokemon by a mile. Next is Gold and Silver, and the gift Pokemon are the Togepi from the Mystery Egg, Kenya the Spearow, the Eevee from Bill, Shucky the Shuckle, and the Tyrogue from the Karate King. Tyrogue is instantly out. It requires Waterfall to find the Karate King, which you cannot use until you have 8 badges, and the Tyrogue is only level 10. I hate when they do that. I know why they did that, because it evolves at 20, but like, why not just make the Tyrogue available sooner? Shuckle is generally a pretty underwhelming Pokemon without using insane gimmicky strategies. I know you don't effle with Shuckle, but like, most of the time it's not that great. And since this is Gen 2, Togepi is not Fairy type and cannot become Togekiss. In other words, it stinks butt cheeks. Togetic's base stat total is only 405, which means it's only as strong as a middle stage starter, and it requires a friendship evolution. So it's down to Eevee versus Kenya the Spearow. Bill gives you Eevee and Goldenrod after meeting him in Ecruteak, while Kenya can be given to you a bit sooner, as soon as you get to Goldenrod. Now at first glance, this may seem an easy choice. Eevee can turn into 5 different powerful Pokemon, while Fearow is just an underpowered bird. Wrong! First, I want you to watch this clip from my best evolutions in every game video. First off, Espeon and Umbreon are friendship evolutions, which have always been annoying, but they're even more annoying in Gen 2 with no Soothe Bell. Plus, if you level up too far, you can miss out on moves you can't get back because there's no move reminder either. But it's actually the original trio that are in dire straits. In Gold and Silver, the only way you can get a Water, Fire, and Thunderstone is from Bill's grandpa in the Sea Cottage, which is in Kanto! It is impossible to use Vaporeon, Flareon, or Jolteon on a pre-league team without trading, which is unhinged. Like, why would you lock regional dex Pokemon to after the league? So, Eevee is worse than it appears, while Kenya is better. Fearow gets Drill Peck, which in Gens 1 through 3 was stronger than Fly. Plus, Kenya has a different OT than yours, uncommon for gift Pokemon, and thus gets boosted experience, which is wildly helpful. Really, the only downside to Kenya is that you have to commit a crime. The guard intends for you to drop it off with a friend on the other side of the region, so it's supposed to be a temporary gift. But there are no consequences for not delivering Kenya? So if you're comfortable committing Grand Theft Spearow, then Kenya the Fearow is absolutely the best gift Pokemon in Gold and Silver. Crystal adds 3 significant changes. The first is that the Eevee Stones can be obtained earlier, and thus give you a true chance to use the Kanto Evolution Trio, if you're willing to deal with the annoyance of waiting for random trainers to call you on the phone to give you one. The second is that you can now get a Dratini as a gift in the Dragon's Den, but that's not taking the winning spot since it's after 8 badges and only level 15. But the third and biggest change is the introduction of the Odd Egg. Once you get to the daycare, at least in the Western releases, the daycare man gives you this egg that can hatch one of 7 different Pokemon, all of which will know Dizzy Punch and have a dramatically increased chance of being shiny. Most of these are uninteresting to me, honestly, but Smoochum stands out to me a lot. Jinx has a special attack stat of 115, which pairs really well with its Ice and Psychic typing, which are always special moves in this gen. This type combo is also just insane in this game. Lots of poison types, the fighting gym, Claire's dragon types, and then in the league, oh my god, the league. 19 league Pokemon are weak to ice or psychic or both. And there's only 26 total. That's almost 3/4 of the league that just a Jinx could handle. Now, I do have to admit there are some downsides to Smoochum. First, you'll have to reset until you actually hatch a Smoochum, not one of the other Pokemon, and that could take several tries and might force a reset of a shiny. Then you'll be stuck with Smoochum's terrible stats until level 30, or 37 if you want Psychic over Confusion before post-game. Because stupidly, Smoochum gets it at level 37, but Jinx doesn't get it at all. Early game movesets, man, don't make much sense. You'll also have to buy the Ice Punch TM for a decent ice move, although that's not really a big deal. All of that stuff kind of hurts Smoochum's stock a bit, but not enough for it to lose the crown. The Odd Egg Smoochum is the best gift Pokemon in Crystal, and you might get a shiny one too, which is pretty cool. Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald have dramatically less impressive gift Pokemon options. In fact, before the League, which is the only period of time that I'm considering gift Pokemon, there's only 2. The Wynot Egg in Lavaridge and Cast Form from the Weather Institute. Wynot stinks. Wobbuffet is a full gimmick Pokemon with only niche usefulness, and you'd have to raise it from only level 5, since eggs hatched at level 5 before Gen 4. Which means Cast Form actually won something! Ha ha ha! I don't care if I had to exclude fossils to do it, my boy actually won something! Somehow! Also, for the record, Cast Form isn't great, but it's not complete trash. If you set it up with a specific weather and weather ball, like hail against Winona or rain against Tate and Liza, it can be somewhat helpful. I wouldn't call it good, but it's better than a Wynot or Wobbuffet, which can only deal damage if it takes damage itself. Fire Red and Leaf Green have the same offerings as the Gen 1 games, but Lapras is leveled up to 25. Still behind where your team is gonna be, but not as drastically. This does make the call between Eevee and Lapras quite a bit tougher. Eevee gives you more options sooner, but Lapras's early Ice Beam at level 31 is extremely good. Both are very solid, but since Lapras still needs you to spend time training it up to catch it up to the rest of your team, I'm still gonna give Eevee the win here. Diamond and Pearl only have 2 pre-league gift Pokemon. Okay, technically the Heart Home City Eevee could happen before the League if you get the National Pokedex before the League, but no one's gonna do that. It's an insane chore, and it'd be the worst gift Pokemon anyway because you couldn't get it until you had done just an outrageous amount of nonsense. Annoyingly, the other 2 gift Pokemon come from eggs, a Happiny in Heart Home and the Riolu from Iron Island. Happiny can be evolved quickly since you get the Oval Stone in the Lost Tower on the next route, so you can have Chansey early and begin the process of increasing its friendship for evolution at a low level and before your 3rd badge. It's easier to increase the friendship of lower level Pokemon because you get a certain amount of friendship each level up, and of course you have more level ups faster when the Pokemon is lower level. The biggest issue here though is that Chansey and Blissey are really just full support Pokemon, which in my experience tend not to be as useful in playthroughs as they are in competitive battles. For example, Chansey is somewhat infamous for toxic stalling, but like, that doesn't work as well when you're fighting trainers that'll just use a full restore. Lucario is a significantly better Pokemon. Fighting in Steel is a great stab combo for later in the game, combating Byron, Candace, and several other Pokemon scattered across other late game trainers. It has a lot of options for good fighting stab, and you can teach it Flash Cannon thanks to Byron's TM. However, you have to deal with the massive annoyance of raising it up from level 1 when your team is in like the late 40s. At least your team with the Happiny is only in the 20s. I mean, I guess that could help the friendship evolution happen faster because you toss in the Soothe Bell and like level it up from 1 to like 20 relatively quickly, but like still, it's annoying. So Blissey's easier to get. Lucario is much better. And I think I'm gonna give it to Lucario here. They're both quite a bit of work, but Lucario's late game usefulness, I'd say dramatically outweighs having Blissey earlier. Platinum dramatically changes the offerings though. Happiny is gone, and Cynthia now gives you a Togepi egg in Eterna. The Eevee is no longer locked to the post game, and you can get a Porygon in Veilstone. All of these are solid Pokemon, and I should know. I beat the game without catching any Pokemon, which means using a starter Pokemon and then like a bunch of gift Pokemon. I used all these Pokemon. But I have to say, Eevee is just too good to beat. With all the options it gives you, all of which are almost immediately accessible except Glaceon. Poor Glaceon. The Eevee can be useful to you regardless of what your team is prior to that point. Sure, Togepi is earlier and Togekiss is awesome, but you can't get the Shiny Stone until Iron Island, and it's not as crazy good without the Fairy type. Gold and Soul Silver have many of the same gift Pokemon as their predecessors. The Togepi Egg, Kenya the Spearow, Eevee from Bill, Shucky the Shuckle, Dratini from the Dragon's Den, and Tyrogue from the Karate King. There is no odd egg anymore, but there are some new pre-league offerings. One of them is really unique and interesting, but not practical. In the Cianwood City Pokemon Center, an NPC will give you a Tentacool if you have only one Pokemon in your party and 0 in your boxes. It's a creative way to prevent soft locking you on the island. If you have no Pokemon that can learn Surf, you can always get another one that can, so you can get back to the mainland. It's fascinating, but not an accessible Pokemon for most people. Then in the Violet City Pokemon Center, this random guy Primo will give you a Mareep egg, a Wooper egg, and a Slugma egg by inputting the correct password, which you can only know by putting your save file's specific info into an online calculator, because it's like different depending on like your trainer ID or something like that. I used all 3 of these Pokemon in my no-catching playthrough of Heart Gold, but alas, none of them are the best. Quagsire and Magcargo frankly aren't that good, and while Ampharos is great, you can catch a higher level Mareep just down the road. So since the Primo eggs are pretty underwhelming and there's no odd egg, the crown returns to my goat, the bird-napped Spearow, Kenya. Black and White's Bulbapedia list of gift Pokemon is deceptively long. There's the 3 monkeys, but you only get one, the one that's weak to your starter. Zorua is only a gift Pokemon if you have an event Celebi, so that's disqualified. I'm not considering the fossils, and then there's the Larvesta egg, which is absolute trash. Look, I love Volcarona. I don't love raising a level 1 Pokemon all the way up to level 59. 59 just to have a fully evolved Pokemon. I'm not gonna do it. That's unhinged. Black and White were on some kind of nonsense with some of those level up evolution levels. No thank you. This means the monkeys are all that's left, so the crown by default goes to whichever one you get. It's immediately helpful against the first gym, that's the whole point of the gift, but they also have usefulness later. I will say I think Pansear probably performs the best of the 3, with its fire type helping against the bug and ice gyms, while the other 2 really just help against the ground gym. Although the Fire Monkey is good for the same reasons that Tepig is the best starter in Unova, and if you pick Tepig, then you'd get Pansage. But No matter which one you get, they're all the best gift Pokemon. The others are terrible, and they're gonna help you with the first gym right away. Black 2 and White 2 also have a deceptively long list. All of the Pokemon on this very long list are actually post-game, except the starters, and Zorua from Rude, and the hidden ability Deerling from the Season Research Lab. Both Zorua and Deerling are obtained around the same time, and each have something unique about them. Zorua's OT is N, which means it gains boosted experience, while Deerling has its hidden ability Serene Grace, which boosts the chance for move's secondary effects to activate. Sawsbuck's grass typing is more useful sooner, being immediately helpful in the ground gym than the water gym later. Zoroark's dark typing comes into play in the league against Chantal and Caitlyn. Because of Sawsbuck's earlier usefulness, this may appear like an easy win for Deerling, but it's not as good as it seems. The first issue is that it doesn't evolve until level 34, noticeably above Clay's level. It also doesn't get a damaging grass move until Energy Ball at 32, which uses Sawsbuck's inferior special attack. But most unfortunate for Deerling is that its hidden ability is actually worse than its regular ones. In all of Sawsbuck's entire level up moveset, the only moves that have secondary effects that Serene Grace could boost are Energy Ball, which as already mentioned uses its inferior special attack, and whatever move Nature Power decides to summon, which is of course inconsistent. Then the only other move it learns that Serene Grace helps is Bounce from a move tutor. If you want to use Sawsbuck on your team, you're actually better off just catching a Sap Sipper one in the grass right outside the research lab's door. Therefore, Zorua is the best gift Pokemon in Black 2 and White 2, especially because it's also the only way to get a Zorua in the game. Next are X and Y. And this is where I have to clarify that thing that I mentioned earlier. The second starter choice also does not count for this video. In case you don't remember, when you reach Sycamore's lab in Lumiose, he lets you pick one of the Kanto starters that you can eventually Mega Evolve. It didn't feel in the spirit of the video to include them because in my other best starter videos, I've discussed the best pair of starters to pick in X and Y. So without that choice and the fossils, that leaves the Lucario from Karina and the Lapras from the breeder east of Shalor City. Both are great Pokemon and it was a tough call. I'm just kidding, it's obviously the Mega Lucario. 625 base stat total, over 140 in both attack stats, and then it has adaptability, which boosts its stab power from 1.5 times to 2 times. This is a fully broken Pokemon that can steamroll the rest of the game single-handedly. This is the best gift Pokemon, period. And the fact you get it in a game where almost no other trainers even use Megas is ridiculous. Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire have the same gift Pokemon as the originals, but with many more. Most come after the League though, and the only new one before the League is Cosplay Pikachu, given at level 20 after completing any contest. This is interesting because each costume comes with a very unique signature move, but the Pikachu can't evolve. And it doesn't have boosted stats like the starter Pikachu in Let's Go Pikachu. Therefore, it's stuck as a 320 base stat total regular Pikachu with a fancy move. Maybe I'd consider it if you fought the water or flying gyms, like immediately, but you don't. They come a lot later, and therefore the Pikachu stinks for battling. Good for contests, but I care about the battling. Therefore, the crown stays with cast form, which is pretty dope, and honestly, fair. I've actually beat all of Alpha Sapphire with just a cast form. Sun and Moon's options are sparse. Without the fossil Pokemon, the only pre-league options are the Eevee Egg from the Rancher at Poniola Ranch and the Aerodactyl from the Ace Trainer in Seafolk Village. Yes, Aerodactyl is a fossil Pokemon, but I'm not excluding fossil Pokemon, I'm excluding fossils that require revival. And she doesn't give you an old Amber, she just gives you an Aerodactyl, so it counts. Both of these gift Pokemon are sadly underwhelming though. Eevee has the problem of being redundant. You can find Wild Eevee on Route 4 before Poniola Town at a higher level. The gift Eevee could be better if it had its hidden ability maybe, but it doesn't have anything special about it. It's just a regular Eevee. Then Aerodactyl's issue is that it's late. You can't get it until you arrive at Seafolk Village when your team is in the early 40s. Thus its rock and flying type have already missed out on many of the battles they'd be most helpful with. Hala, Totem Salazzle, and Totem Lurantis. It can still come into play for some of the later battles though, such as the Totem Kamo-O plus Kahili and Hala in the league. Better late than useless though. Since there's no reason to train up the hatched Eevee when you can get a better one in the wild, Aerodactyl is the best gift Pokemon in Sun and Moon. But while Sun and Moon had scant options, Ultra Sun and Moon go absolutely nuts. They still have the Eevee and Aerodactyl, but they also add a Surf-knowing Pikachu if you get the high score on all 4 Surf courses, and a Poipole after beating Ultra Necrozma. Neither of these are the best though, since they show up very late. However, they also added a litany of extra big Totem Pokemon. You get them by collecting totem stickers as you progress through your journey, then talking to Samson Oak on Hee Hee Beach. There are 11 total, but you can only get 6 in one playthrough, since all but Mimikyu are version exclusive. In Ultra Sun, you get Gumshoos, Alolan Marowak, Lurantis, Vikavolt, Mimikyu, and Rabombi. But Rabombi is sadly only possible post-game due to needing all 100 stickers, one of which is at the Battle Tree. In Ultra Moon, it's Alolan Raticate, Araquanid, Salazzle, Togedemaru, Mimikyu, and Kamo-O, which is like Rabombi, only post-game. The totem stickers are not story-based, but thankfully I know around in the story when you'd get them if you're good about getting the stickers, because I did a playthrough of Ultra Moon without catching any Pokemon. Because of that, and also Ultra Sun playthroughs, I have experience with some of these totem Pokemon, so I am very confident in which ones are the best. In Ultra Sun, it's definitely the Totem Marowak. Marowak has generally underwhelming stats, but if you get it a thick club item, annoying but very doable, you'll double its attack stat, making it brutally powerful. If you're good about getting the stickers, you'll get it right before the grass trial. Perfect timing. Its Fire Ghost combos then helpful against the Totem Togedemaru, Totem Mimikyu, Guzma's countless bugs, and the Totem Rabombi, all before the Pokemon League, where it goes on to help with half of the Elite Four. Additionally, this Totem Alolan Marowak is better than any other Alolan Marowak for 2 reasons. First, preposterously, Marowak gets Shadow Bone at level 27 in Gen 7. The Totem one is gifted at level 25, so it learns it shortly after, but normal Cubone evolve at level 28, missing the only physical ghost move it learns at all. And the move reminder isn't until the League. This is horrible game design. They remedied it in Gen 8 because they made it so Shadow Bone was an Evo move, which the Pokemon learns it as soon as they evolve. But they could have done that in Gen 7. That's when evolution moves were introduced. Or just make it learn Shadow Bone at level 29.
24.
Because of this outrageous oversight, the only reasonable way to use an Alolan Marowak on your team in Gen 7 is to use the Totem Alolan Marowak in Ultra Sun. Additionally, the Totem Marowak has its hidden ability, Rock Head, which prevents recoil damage. This is useless for a while, but then at level 53, it learns the game-changing move, Flare Blitz. 120 power stab move with attack doubled by Thick Club and no recoil damage drawback. It hits like 100 trucks. Then in Ultra Moon, the other fire type is also my pick, the Totem Salazzle. You get it only slightly after Marowak, around arrival to Ula Ula Island, but that's fine since it's not great for Olivia anyways. High speed and special attack, good special move pool, and toxic poisoning totem Pokemon, even steel ones thanks to corrosion, can be a great strategy since they don't have seemingly endless ways to heal themselves like some trainers do. It doesn't have quite as many favorable matchups as Marowak does, but its poisoning abilities and speed I think balance that out. Besides, you can't pick one over the other, they're in different games. Now, of course, both of these fire types overlap with Incineroar, and then Marowak's ghost type overlaps with Decidueye. But like, Primarina's the best starter in Alola, so just pick that. Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee have mostly the same offerings as Yellow, but with some changes. First, the Celadon Eevee is gone, since it's now a starter in one of the versions. Next is that the trio of Bulbasaur, Charmander, and Squirtle are dramatically less valued now. All 3 can be caught in the wild before they're accessible as gifts. Lapras is also leveled up again, now finally at level 34, only slightly lower than where your team would be. But like the starters, you can now find it in the wild at an even higher level. Porygon is also a new gift Pokemon in Silph Co, but once again, can be found in the wild before this. Hitmonlee and Hitmonchan are not devalued though, since while they're now found in the wild too, it's not until Victory Road. Unfortunately, fighting still kind of sucks in Kanto. Like, yeah, Dark and Steel exists now, but the only dark types are the in-game trade Alola forms, and then like the only steel types are Magnemite and Magneton. And also they're like fairies are a thing. Oh no. The newest and most interesting gift Pokemon are Persian in Let's Go Pikachu and Arcanine in Let's Go Eevee. Growlithe and Meowth are version exclusives, and in Vermilion City, if you show a specific character 5 of the base form found in your version, they'll give you the evolution of the Pokemon in the other. This is cool because both can be ridden immediately, allowing you to speed around the region sooner than you may have been able to otherwise. But if you want to use them as anything more than just bike replacements, they've got some problems. Persian is simply just not a stellar Pokemon in general. Really good in Gen 1 when crits were tied to speed. That's not a thing anymore. And then Arcanine, while very powerful, has a terrible moveset because it's a stone evolution, and so it misses out on crucial level up moves that only Growlithe gets, such as Flare Blitz or Crunch. TMs can help, but this will be an inferior Arcanine. I mean, it allows you to have an Arcanine at all in Let's Go Eevee, but like, still. When discussing the other games so far, I've tried to balance usefulness with uniqueness. So even if a Pokemon's really useful, it has its value decreased if it's found elsewhere better sooner. But here I have to choose a useful Pokemon that's not unique, like Bulbasaur or Lapras, or a unique Pokemon that's not useful, like Persian or Arcanine. It was a tough call, but I decided that the best one overall is Lapras. Persian and Arcanine are simply better used as dex filler bikes than team members. A wild Bulbasaur can be caught sooner than the gift Pokemon and thus used against Brock, and while Lapras can be found elsewhere, it's actually quite challenging to catch. Simply taking the gift one can save a lot of headache. And then you have a strong water type to finish the game with, then use its ice powers against Lance and Trace's Mega Pidgeot. And now we've reached Generation 8, beginning the era of DLC. From here on out, when discussing a game that does have DLC, I will give one answer assuming you do not have the DLC, and one answer assuming that you do. However, all gift Pokemon still have to be obtainable before you've beaten the league. In Sword and Shield, I actually don't have much of a choice in the base game. Ignoring fossils, starters, and post-game Pokemon, the only gift Pokemon left are the Toxel Egg plus Gigantamax Pikachu and Eevee, which require save data of Let's Go on your Switch to get. That's like kinda DLC, like kinda event. I really don't think that should count, but even if they did, like they don't evolve. Not great. Plus Toxel is just simply better. It's annoying to train up to Toxtricity, but once you have one, it's a fun Pokemon to use. I actually used one in my first Sword playthrough. But then if you have the DLC, you get some insanely good gift Pokemon. And a lot of them. We're ignoring the Crown Tundra gifts because they come too late. The levels are not scaled down if you have not beaten the game, or completed the Darkest Day, which is basically beating the game. Events in the Isle of Armor do scale down though, and it features a ton of gift Pokemon. Mostly Alola Pokemon from Finding Diglett, but also a Porygon. But none compare to ones you get earlier than that, simply by progressing the quest. First, very early, you can choose a Bulbasaur or Squirtle, both with the Gigantamax factor. The Kanto starter's G-Max moves are insanely good, according to Wolfie, utterly broken in doubles. So one of these two is the clear winner. Or they would be if you didn't get Cubfu. It's not that much later in the quest, and then it's work to get it evolved with having to travel around, increase its friendship, and then you have to be able to win the battles in the tower of your choice, but those battles can be won around level 30, which means you can have an Urshifu with a base stat total of 550 and a signature move that always crits preposterously early. Remember how I said the Gigantamax starters were broken? Urshifu has broken all of competitive Pokemon. It ignores Protect! Cubfu is easily the best gift Pokemon in Sword and Shield, regardless of the Urshifu form that you choose. I'd spend more time discussing like which form is better, but like just the fact that it's a fighting type is amazing against the final 3 gyms. Like this thing, if not for Mega Lucario, would be the best gift Pokemon in this video. Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl have the same gift Pokemon as Diamond and Pearl, plus 2 mythical, yes, mythical, Pokemon available stupid early. In Floaroma Town, you can get Mew if you have Let's Go save data, and Jirachi if you have Sword or Shield save data. These are obviously the best gift Pokemon. Jirachi, I think, a bit better thanks to its Steel type, but they do require other games to be obtainable. I think it's best to exclude them because you need something other than just the game you're playing to get them, so they're not gonna count. Instead, my answer is just the same as Diamond and Pearl. Riolu from Iron Island. Legends Arceus, Arceus, only has 2 non-starter gift Pokemon, an Alolan Vulpix for completing a request, and then Arceus, which I guess is a gift from itself? Like, you best it in hand-to-hand combat somehow, and then he's like, take a piece of me. And I'm like, what, like a leg? Vulpix obviously wins though, like you only get the Arceus when the game is literally over. Finally, Scarlet and Violet, but there are almost no gift Pokemon without the DLC. One of them is a level 5 Galarian Meowth, which you can get by completing Salvatore's friendship quest. But then the only other ones Bulbapedia considers are Koraidon and Miraidon, but not technically obtained until defeating the Paradise Protection Protocol. Galarian Meowth's the easy win here. I think it's debatable about whether Koraidon and Miraidon should count as gift Pokemon, but like, even if you do, it's literally you've beaten the game. And like, that is my threshold, so like, they're too late. Besides, I think Berserker, like there's some good builds for it for like Terra raids, so that could be cool. But if we factor in the DLC, the Indigo Disc doesn't add any new gifts, but the Teal Mask adds 3. An egg from Jacques with a random Sinnoh starter, a Hisuian Growlithe after completing the Blood Moon Beast storyline, and a shiny Munchlax for clearing the Ogre Oustin on hard difficulty. Growlithe comes too late, since Blood Moon Ursaluna is level 70 and does not scale down. The Munchlax isn't great either, since being shiny is cool, but accessing Ogre Oustin, then somehow beating hard difficulty sounds frankly nightmarish. The starter egg is easily the best. You can get it as soon as you get to Kitakami, basically. Low effort, free, and a bonus starter. All 3 are great, but if you want to reset for a specific one, the best is definitely Infernape. In my video, Best Starter Pokemon if every game had all of them, I named Infernape as the best starter in Paldea. Firefighting as a type combo matches up so well against so much of the early game, and you can get this egg before taking on any story battles, since the only requirement to go to Kitakami is beginning the treasure hunt quest. Most mainline Pokemon games let you get Eevee, one of the most beloved Pokemon in history. But have you ever gotten one and then been unsure which evolution to turn it into? In this video, I'll cover what I believe is the best evolution to use in each mainline Pokemon game where you can get Eevee before the Pokemon League. Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow give you 1 gift Eevee in Celadon City, obtained at level 25. And thanks to stones in the nearby department store, you can instantly evolve it into Flareon, Jolteon, or Vaporeon. But which one is best? Well, it's not Flareon. While Erica's Grass Gym is immediate, you have to raise Flareon to level 31 to only get Ember in Red and Blue, but then in Yellow it's level 36 for Fire Spin, both of which kinda stink. There is no TM for Flamethrower in Gen 1, and Flareon doesn't get it by level up until the 50s. So it'll be a pain to make it helpful for the Erica battle, but then after that, there's like nothing else that's weak to fire. There's no bug specialist, no steel type at all, and the ice types are mostly water type too. Another problem with Flareon is that its best stat is physical attack, but prior to Gen 4, all fire moves are special. In Gen 1, its special stat was 110, same as the other 2 evolutions, and not bad, but not getting stabbed with its best attacking stat is rough. And it's gonna get worse in Gen 2 when the special stat splits. So sadly, because of this, Flareon's gonna struggle for a little bit, which is a bummer, because I like Flareon. As for Jolteon and Vaporeon, they're pretty close. Jolteon's level up moveset is poor, but by this point in the game, you already have the Thunderbolt TM from Lieutenant Surge. Additionally, Jolteon gets Pin Missile, one of the extremely few bug moves in the game, which could provide some help against the overpowered psychic types. However, there's one big bummer for Jolteon. You already beat Misty. Electric is only strong against water and flying, and since you missed water and there's no flying gym, that means Jolteon isn't much help in any major battles until the Pokemon League. in which it's great. 4 of Lorelei's Pokemon, 1 of Agatha's, 2 of Lance's, and up to 3 of your rivals, depending on your game and starter choice. Jolteon isn't stellar immediately, but it's a good investment in your future. Might as well nickname it Compounding Interest. That's silly. It's much longer than the character limit. However, Vaporeon is also quite good. You can teach it Water Gun or Bubble Beam immediately from TMs you should already have, or with some patience, you can wait and teach it Surf, the best water move in the game, and still before the gym battles it excels against, Blaine and Giovanni. It's not as good as Jolteon in the league though, only having type advantage over Bruno's weak Onixes, Lance's Aerodactyl, and your rival's ground and fire types. 2 Pokemon he has regardless of game or starter. However, Vaporeon gets something that most evolutions struggle with: coverage. And for Vaporeon, it's the very useful Ice type. In Yellow, it learns Aurora Beam at level 36, but in all the games, you can use the Ice Beam TM from the Celadon department store roof. This coverage helps a lot with Lance. Dragon types are effectively only weak to Ice in Gen 1, since the only dragon attack was Dragon Rage that did a set amount of damage, and of course Fairy did not exist. Vaporeon gives you an option for super effective moves against the toughest Elite Four member. In short, both Jolteon and Vaporeon can be really helpful Pokemon if you're willing to use TMs. Which you should be, what else are you gonna use them for? But as for which is better, I'm giving a slight edge to Jolteon because of critical hits. In Gen 1 only, a Pokemon's chance to land a critical hit is based on its base speed, and Jolteon is tied for the second fastest Pokemon in the game. That means Jolteon's crit chance every time it attacks is about 25%, around double Vaporeon's. For context, in all the games after Gen 1, the base crit chance ranges from only 4 to 6%. It's set up perfectly to just outspeed and crit blast things to death. Another bonus of Jolteon is that it makes sense even if you pick Squirtle. For most games, I won't take into account starter choice at all, but when 2 are really close, I'll allow it to help break a close tie. We now move on to Gold, Silver, and Crystal, where Bill gifts you a level 20 Eevee in Goldenrod City after meeting him in Ecruteak, meaning you can have Eevee before the 4th gym battle. There's also 2 new evolutions, Psychic type Espeon and Dark type Umbreon. An exciting new era where everything is actually garbage. First off, Espeon and Umbreon are friendship evolutions, which have always been annoying, but they're even more annoying in Gen 2 with no Soothe Bell. Plus, if you level up too far, you can miss out on moves you can't get back because there's no move reminder either. But it's actually the original trio that are in dire straits. In Gold and Silver, the only way you can get a Water, Fire, and Thunderstone is from Bill's grandpa in the Sea Cottage, which is in Kanto! It is impossible to use Vaporeon, Flareon, or Jolteon on a pre-league team without trading, which is unhinged. Like, why would you lock regional dex Pokemon to after the league? Also, side note, those evolution stones are the only ones in the whole game. How the heck did they expect you to complete the Pokedex? Crystal version did fix this problem, but not in a fun way. There are some trainers on the routes just outside Ecruteak, specifically Lass Dana, Schoolboy Allen, and Fisherman Tully, who can call you to offer the evolution stones needed. While this is early and repeatable, it's still super annoying. So we'll have to segment things between Gold and Silver versus Crystal. For Gold and Silver, Espeon and Umbreon are your only 2 options, since I'm not allowing the other 3 if you can't get them until post-game. Espeon gets Psybeam at level 36, and Umbreon gets Feint Attack at the same time. So even if you evolve them earlier, they're not really gonna be much use until then. This does unfortunately mean that neither can help with Morty, and Espeon can't help with Chuck. They could help with Team Rocket though, and if it works out that way with Johto's weird level curves, Espeon is excellent due to all the poison types they use. Neither care much about the last few gyms, but once you hit the league, Espeon pulls ahead. Umbreon walls Will, but that's really it. Meanwhile, Espeon crushes Koga first, because while he has bug types, none have bug moves. Then it easily beats Bruno, and while Karen's dark types are scary, she still has 2 poison types. Espeon also just gets better moves. Espeon's best attack is Psychic, which is 90 power, while Umbreon's is Feint Attack, only 60 power. With the weaker move and poor offenses, Umbreon will struggle to one-shot anything. And I don't know about you, but that would annoy me. But what about Crystal? Let's say you opt to deal with the annoying phone call stone acquisition and you can have any of the evolutions around the time of the 4th gym. Are any of them gonna be better than Espeon? Jolteon gets weirdly super nerfed because there is no Thunderbolt TM, so we can only learn it from an expensive move tutor in the game corner post-game. I don't know, man, there's some weird decisions in these games. Since the Eevee is level 20, that means you miss Thundershock. So unless you want to pay 5,500 coins in the game corner for the Thunder TM, Jolteon goes without an electric move until level 52.
Let's go gambling!
It's outrageous and sadly disqualifying. Flareon also struggles in the move department, getting only Fire Spin at level 36, then Flamethrower at level 52. Its offense is also worse now, with its 110 special being split into 110 special defense and 95 special attack. Vaporeon turns out fine though. Since you get the Surf HM and Ekritique, it immediately gets the best water move in the game, then it gets Aurora Beam at level 36, which is nice since there is no Ice Beam TM. With these two moves, Vaporeon beats Jasmine's Steelix, Price's Piloswine, Claire's 3 Dragonairs, Koga's Crobat, Bruno's Onix, Karen's Houndoom, and every one of Lance's Pokemon except Gyarados. This absolutely makes it better than Espeon in my opinion. Feraligatr gaining Ice Fang in Gen 4 was a huge buff for it, since it makes it so much better against the 2 different dragon specialists. Vaporeon has that ice coverage in Gen 2 without needing a TM, and is helpful across so many battles. Plus, again, thanks to the Surf HM, Vaporeon is set with its best move immediately, whereas Espeon's gonna require more patience. Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald do not have Eevee in them, although are necessary to get Espeon and Umbreon, because they have a day and night cycle, whereas Fire Red and Leaf Green don't. And this was just implemented in such a way so that you could not get Umbreon and Espeon before the league in Fire Red and Leaf Green, which I think is stupid. So we skip over Hoenn and move to Fire Red and Leaf Green, where the choice is again the original trio of Flareon, Jolteon, and Vaporeon, since as mentioned, the Umbreon Espeon evolution is impossible. Eevee is found in the same place as Gen 1, a gift in Celadon City, and the evolution stones can still be purchased nearby. Most everything is the same as in Gen 1, so Flareon is still struggling with move options, and Fire's just not that good in Kanto. However, there is one significant change, and that is that instead of Thunderbolt, Lieutenant Surge gives out Shockwave. The Thunderbolt TM is instead in the game corner for 4,000 coins, and since 500 coins cost $10,000 each, it'll cost you $80,000 to afford the single-use Thunderbolt. This means for Jolteon to have an electric attack, you either have to shell out a ton of money or use Shockwave, which is significantly weaker than Thunderbolt. Jolteon's Pin Missile is also less important due to the introduction of dark moves like Bite and Crunch, plus it no longer has the enhanced critical hit chance. In short, Jolteon ended up being kinda nerfed, whereas Vaporeon has remained about the same. This means Vaporeon takes the lead over Jolteon in Gen 3 because it is much less annoying to make good. Jolteon's main usefulness is in the league, and by that time, I don't know man, just catch Zapdos. Now we move to Gen 4, first Diamond and Pearl, which are stupid! Leafeon and Glaceon were introduced, exciting new evolutions, but Eevee cannot be obtained without the National Pokedex. Gonna rant for a little bit here? Making all these cool new evolutions like Gliscor and Leafeon and Magmortar and stuff not available until after you get the National Dex was one of the dumbest game design decisions in Pokemon history. Like, why would you do that? Why would you do that? One of the big reasons Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl are so bad is because they kept the same freaking dex. There's 2 fire types when you could have just had Magmortar available. It's ridiculous. I mean, yeah, they had more Pokemon in the underground, but still I couldn't get Gliscor before the league. Okay, now that my rant is over, I have to acknowledge that it is technically possible to get the National Dex before the Pokemon League in Diamond and Pearl, because it's based on whether or not you've seen the Pokemon, not owning them. And so it is doable, but you're not gonna want to. Without trading over a bunch of Pokemon, you'll have to basically complete everything except the league, then evolve to obtain the Pokemon you can only see in the league. And then the Eevee you get's only gonna be level 5 if you get the gift one from Beeb, or in the teens if you get the 5% daily Trophy Garden Pokemon. It should not be done. Do not use Eevee in Diamond and Pearl. The cost is too great. But since it's technically possible, I have to tell you which one's best. Looking at only their stab moves, Flareon, Leafeon, and Glaceon have the most positive matchups against League Pokemon, but they each have a flaw. Flareon and Leafeon are physical attackers, but their best stab moves at league level are only Fire Fang and Razor Leaf. Glaceon can have Ice Beam, but it's slow and not really bulky, which means against brick-breaking Garchomp, it's not as good as it would appear. Vaporeon comes in slightly behind those three with 6 League Pokemon weak to water. However, as discussed, Vaporeon's ice coverage is huge for it. If you include that, its usefulness expands to 11 Pokemon. Vaporeon is also better against Cynthia's Garchomp, in my opinion, since it isn't weak to any of Garchomp's moves, and since Garchomp's weakness is 4 times, you can likely still one-shot it with an ice move, even without stab. Ice offense is great, ice defense tends to be a liability, which is why, unfortunately, in most cases, Vaporeon's gonna be better than Glaceon. This means the best evolution in Diamond and Pearl is Vaporeon, but again, this is just in the insane scenario of getting the Eevee before the league. Let's move to Platinum, the best version of Sinnoh. Okay, well, I mean, if you count Legends Arceus as Sinnoh, which it is, you know, but it's called something different. I actually don't know whether I prefer Platinum or Legends Arceus. They're both very good. And in Platinum, everything is more reasonable. BB gives you a level 20 Eevee upon arrival in Hearthome City before you even have 3 badges. You can get more at the Trophy Garden, but this one is sooner. One thing I have to cover though is that sadly, Glaceon just doesn't make sense. You don't get to the Icy Rock until right before the 7th badge, where all the other evolution methods for Eevee are near immediate. You can backtrack to Eterna Forest's Mossy Rock, grab the evolution stones in the underground or Solaceon ruins, and nothing is stopping the friendship progression. Personal note here, I've hated location-based evolutions basically the whole time they were a thing, but especially after I got a Charge-a-Bug in Sun and couldn't turn it into a Vikavolt until Vast Ponykenyon, when my team was like level 50. Umbreon, as cool as it is, really is not that great. You'd have to put in a lot of work to get its friendship up quickly enough for it to evolve in time to fight Fantina, so more realistically, you won't evolve it until later. Espeon is not much better, since while you could definitely have it evolve before Mainline, only one of her 3 Pokemon is actually weak to Psychic. Jolteon is good against 2 of Wake's Pokemon and more than half of Cyrus's final team, but that's it. Leafeon is about the same, but as discussed earlier, is better in the league. That leaves Vaporeon and Flareon. As mentioned, I think Vaporeon is a bit better in the league, and with the full game, it's also good against 2 of Byron's Pokemon, Candace's Piloswine, and with ice coverage, 3 of Cyrus's Pokemon. Flareon beats Mayleen's Lucario, 2 of Byron's Pokemon, all of Candace's, and Cyrus's Weavile. It's really close, and I feel so bad, but I gotta give it to Vaporeon again. I want Flareon to be good, but it's just, there's a lot going against it. Both of them are slow, but Flareon is not as bulky. And while Vaporeon can get Surf once you get to Celestic Town, Flareon's best fire move will be Fire Fang after that, which isn't even that strong. Tack on Vaporeon's advantage in the league, and Vaporeon is the best once again. Although if you start with Empoleon, I say try Flareon. Now to Heart Gold and Soul Silver, and while Glaceon and Leafeon exist, you cannot get them. There is no Moss Rock or Ice Rock in all of Kanto and Johto. Dumb, I know. Additionally, the Evolution Stone situation is similar to Crystal. You can get them early, but it won't be fun, having to wait for a few trainers to call you. They're definitely incentivizing Espeon and Umbreon. While much is the same from the Gen 2 games, one big difference is that the Gift Eevee is now at level 5 instead of 20. This may sound more annoying, requiring more level grinding to catch up to the rest of your team, but I actually think it's better. It means your evolution can get a stab move if it evolves by level 15, instead of 36 like before. Additionally, the friendship evolutions are easier now since you can get the Soothe Bell and can have more level ups, each of which boost friendship. But to be clear, that will still suck. Even with the Soothe Bell, leveling up alone gives you too few friendship points to evolve by level 15. To safely friendship evolve the Eevee in time for its earlier stab move, you pretty much have to give it a daily haircut from the Haircut Brothers for minimum a week. Changing your clock can get around this, but it's so stupid that you have to cheese the game just to get an evolution with an early stab move. They fixed this in later generations where they introduced evolution moves where a Pokemon learns a move as soon as it evolves and the evolutions all get them, but that's not until Gen 7. But however annoying, it is possible. So it does mean that now Espeon and Umbreon can be used against Morty and are strong against him, although Espeon's obviously risky. And Espeon can now be reasonably used against Chuck too, plus more battles with your rivals and Team Rocket's poison types. Because of this expanded earlier use, I'm saying Espeon moves past Vaporeon for the best evolution in Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Plus, it's nice you can use it alongside for Alligator. Now for Gen 5, Black and White, which famously have no previous gen Pokemon available before rolling the credits. But Black 2 and White 2 add the evolutions to its regional dex. However, Leafeon and Glaceon get screwed again. The Moss Rock is in Pinwheel Forest, and the Ice Rock is in Twist Mountain, both of which are post-game locations, so sadly Leafeon and Glaceon once again are not options. Ugh, I wish they'd changed these to stone evolutions so long ago. I hate location evolutions. May they rest in pain. Eevee can be caught in Castelia Park, accessible through the Castelia sewers at level 18 or 19. There's a gift one too, but that's not until you beat the league. None of the evolution stones are obtainable before fighting Berg, and while you could friendship evolve before that, it's not really worth it considering both Espeon and Umbreon are weak to Bug. So we'll mainly be looking at battles from Elisa onward. Vaporeon, the most successful one up to this point, is not actually that great in these games. The first reliable way to get a Water Stone is on Route 19, but it requires Surf, which you don't get until you defeat Clay, the main gym battle Vaporeon excels in. You can technically get one sooner in the Hidden Grottos, but it's like a 0.25% chance. It's not worth it. Vaporeon's ice coverage can help with Drayden, and it's quite solid against Iris as a whole, but that's really it. Flareon has almost no good matchups since the bug battle is done, then there aren't any major ice or grass specialists. It's really only decent against Colress. Espeon's good against Marshall, but that's it, and Umbreon's good against Chantal and Caitlyn, but that's it. That leaves Jolteon, which is my pick for the best in Black 2 and White 2. It has an advantage over two gym leaders, Skyla and Marlin, and while its level up moveset takes some time to give you a special electric move, you will have Discharge before Skyla. Before that, Volt Absorb can help against Elisa too. Additionally, your rival Hugh always has an Unfezant, and he has a water type if you did not choose Oshawott. And for many battles, those are two of his 3 Pokemon. Jolteon's not really OP in the league, but it's the most helpful before that. Now we move on to X and Y, the final games to introduce a new evolution, Sylveon. But will it be the best? Eevee is found wild in the grass on Route 10, just north of Sillage City, meaning it's pretty early. Unfortunately, again, the Ice and Moss Rocks are not. The Ice Rock is in Frost Cavern, only accessible after 6 badges, and the Moss Rock is within the Winding Woods, south of the final gym town. Infuriating and enraging! They added Leafeon and Glaceon and just crapped all over them from the point they were introduced. Thankfully, the older evolutions are straightforward though, with all the stones being accessible before this point, and while the Soothe Bell must wait until Shalour City, nothing is stopping the friendship progression. Plus, since it's wild, you could catch it with a luxury ball. You can't buy them before this point, but you get 5 in Sycamore's lab. So don't mess up. Sylveon is more annoying, since if you don't do things exactly right via the method shown on screen, you will miss out on a fairy attack for quite some time. However, this doesn't really matter since the best evolution is Flareon. Flareon? Oh my god, it's Flareon! Flareon's fire typing is strong against Ramos, 2 of Clement's Pokemon thanks to Heliolisk's Dry Skin, Valerie's Mawile, and all of Wulfric's Pokemon. All the other evolutions pale in comparison. Then, as an added bonus, it's great against Wickstrom's Steel types in the league. Plus, it gets Flame Charge, Plus, it now gets Flame Charge, oh my god. Plus, it now gets Flame Charge, which can help offset its poor speed, and Flare Blitz, its strongest move, at the reasonable level of 45. Finally, Flareon is good! Celebration! Although, the primary reason Flareon is good is because fire is good in Kalos, just across the board, which means that Delphox and the Mega Charizards are also good. And they're definitely better than Flareon. But if you want to roll Chestnut Blastoise or a Greninja Venusaur, Flareon's right there. Next is Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, and while you could not get Eevee in the originals, you can in the remakes, although pretty late. After catching Kyogre or Groudon and getting the National Dex, you can Dex Nav Eevee on Route 116. It is quite rare and only level 8, but hey, it's possible. Getting it so late also means you can reasonably turn it into any evolution because you have access to the whole map at this point. So which evolution is best against the final gym, Wally, and the League? I tallied up every major battle Pokemon each of the evolutions had a favorable matchup against, and while most had several, sorry Espeon, you really got screwed by the first two Elite Four being Dark and Ghost, there was one that was a clear winner, Sylveon. Sylveon's fairy typing is huge against Wally's very scary Mega Gallade, and then it goes on to crush both Sydney and Drake. Fairy is especially nice against Drake since the ice moves from Vaporeon or Glaceon don't really work on Kingdra. Additionally, Sylveon gets Shadow Ball as coverage, helping out with Phoebe. It would be odd to go through all of this effort just to use a Pokemon for the last few battles of the game, but hey, if you want to do it, Sylveon's the best one. Now we move to Alola, Sun, Moon, Ultra Sun, and Ultra Moon, where Eevee is easily obtainable shortly after arriving on Akala Island, whether in the wild or from a gift egg. Additionally, there's a small chance for a wild Eevee to SOS call in Espeon or Umbreon depending on the time of day, so that's fun. As for the evolution accessibility, it kind of depends on the game. Espeon, Umbreon, and Sylveon are all equal. Nothing is stopping that progression. The Ice Rock is surprise. Late game as hell in Mount Lanakila. It's like they really hate Glaceon. And while the Moss Rock is not as bad, it's not until the Lush Jungle, which is after the water trial. The stones in the Ultra games are easy. Show someone at the nursery your hatched Eevee, and you get to pick one. But in Sun and Moon, the Thunder and Water Stones are after the Fire Trial, and the Fire Stone is after the Grass Trial. There's Poképelago stone hunting, but you can't go there until you've beaten the Fire Trial. So it's really weird. In Sun and Moon, they made it so the evolution stones for the evolutions that would be most helpful against that particular trial are not until after that particular trial. Despite the late Water Stone though, Vaporeon still takes the crown here. It misses the Fire Trial, but after that it beats Olivia, both as Kahuna and in the League, and Hapu. But if you factor in its ice coverage and Shadow Ball, it's useful against the Lurantis battle, risky, I know, the Totem Kamo-o, Acerola, and Kahili. The other evolutions don't measure up as well due to having more limited coverage. These matchups are a big reason why I've said that Primarina is the best starter for the Alola games. Water and Fairy just match up so well against the major battles, hence making Sylveon the second best evolution. So if you decide to pick Primarina, I'd go with Flareon as the third best option. Its fire typing covers the totem bug type Vikavolt along with Guzma. In Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, my answer is unchanged. Sylveon was second place, but it gets a bit worse due to Hala in the League being replaced with Steel type Malane. Vaporeon, now available before the Fire Trial thanks to the Nursery Water Stone, adds that battle to its usefulness. Additionally, Vaporeon gets Haze by level up, a move that wipes out all stat boosts. This is useful for totem battles because it wipes out the stat boosts that they start the battle with. Now, this was useful in Sun and Moon already, but it's extra good in Ultra Sun and Moon because of Ultra Necrozma, which starts the battle with an Omni boost. Next is Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, and we'll start with Eevee. And the best one is the Eevee. The partner Eevee has better stats than a regular Eevee, although not as good as in Eeveelutions. However, it offsets this by learning absolutely broken moves with very silly names. All of them are 90 base power and 100% accurate, but have insane secondary effects. Buzzy Buzz guarantees paralysis, while Sizzly Slide guarantees a burn. Bouncy Bubble heals, Sappy Seed sets up Leech Seed, Batty Bat and Glitzy Glow set up Reflect and Light Screen respectively, and Sparkly Swirl cures your whole party's status conditions. Then there's VV Volley, a fifth move that does not take up a move slot that boosts power with max friendship, ending up at over 100 power. They are ridiculous! Plus, another big thing here is that you have it the whole playthrough. You can't say that for Eevee in any other game. Like, that's huge. You can use it in every single gym battle. As for Let's Go Pikachu, you'd be using Eevee more traditionally, which means it's a close race between Vaporeon and Jolteon like in previous Kanto games. While there are some differences in level up movesets and TM accessibility, the biggest difference in this game is Lance, who went from having multiple Dragonair to none, meaning his team is now more weak to electric than ice. However, despite that, I'm still giving the win to Vaporeon. Beating the last two gyms is huge, plus the big issue with Jolteon is that it overlaps with the partner Pikachu. As I mentioned, I'm trying to ignore starter choice, but you don't have a starter choice in here. You're starting with the Pikachu no matter what, so there is no scenario where you could use Jolteon without ditching your partner Pikachu. Which really, you shouldn't do. It's pretty freaking good. Therefore, Vaporeon makes more sense on more teams, and so I think it is just a bit better than Jolteon in a Gen 7 Kanto vacuum. And now we reach Sword and Shield, another new era for evolutions. Leafeon and Glaceon finally evolve with stones. Stones in your bag, to be clear, not the big rocks, not boulders, little rocks, pebbles. Eevee is found on Route 4 before the first gym, and all 5 of the evolution stones are accessible early, either normally or from the digging duo. You can use a fully evolved evolution for every gym battle in the game. It's awesome. So which one's best? I don't know. I mean, I do. Like, I had to make a decision, but it was really hard. They're so close. All the evolutions have favorable matchups against 2 to 3 major battles, depending on the version, except in Sword, Leafeon has 4. Yay! Yay for Leafeon! Leafeon beats Nessa, which is big since you fight her twice, along with Gordy if you're playing Sword, and half of Raihan's team. It also gets coverage moves Dig and Iron Tail, which all evolutions get now, but Leafeon is a physical attacker, so it can better use them to be helpful against Rose, Opal, and Bead. Plus, Leech Seed is one of the best support moves in the game, and it gets that really early at level 20. However, in Shield, the Rock Gym is an Ice Gym, so instead my advantage goes to Flareon. It beats Milo immediately, then Melanie and Rose, but again with Iron Tail, it's helpful against all the fairy types, even resisting their attacks because it's a fire type. Leafeon in Sword, Flareon in Shield. Although I will say Vaporeon's a close second for both of them, beating Kabu, Gordy in Sword, and it's by far the best evolution for Raihan's gym battle. In Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl, the evolution situation is identical to Diamond and Pearl. You cannot get Eevee until you have the National Pokedex, which is technically possible before the league, but it will be awful and not fun for most people. Friendly reminder, well, I guess not that friendly. These remakes are trash because of the amount of platinum improvements that they ignored, among other reasons. Vaporeon is still the winner like it was in Gen 4 because of how well the combination of water and ice does in the league. The only place you'd really be able to use it. Legends Arceus is next, where Eevee is found early and the stones are found in ore deposits or space-time distortions wherever. You can also just catch evolutions straight up in those distortions. As for the best evolution, I feel like the answer doesn't really matter that much. Legends isn't a game where you're participating in major traditional battles. The biggest boss fights are the Pokémon fighting you. But I suppose I can give the win to Vaporeon, since 3 of the 5 noble boss Pokemon are weak to water. Although I should mention, weirdly, the best special water move that Vaporeon gets is Water Pulse. I don't know why they did that. Finally, Scarlet and Violet. Eevee is once again catchable before the first badge, either near Cortando or as a fixed encounter in South Province Area 5. And you can get the stones wherever because, well, it's an open world game. Even if the stone is far, like the ice stone, like being on Glaciato Mountain somewhere, like, just go get it. I believe in you. Additionally, all the evolutions now have better coverage than they've ever had before. Leafeon gets Aerial Ace, Glaceon gets Water Pulse, Espeon gets Power Gem. They all get Trailblaze. Regardless of which one you pick, all of the evolutions are better set up for success than in any previous game before. Whichever one you use, it's probably gonna be pretty useful to you. So because of this, it's really hard to decide, so I'm gonna put more focus on the earlier battles in the game. This makes it close between Vaporeon and Flareon. Flareon works well for the Bug Gym, Grass Gym, Giacomo's Pawniard, and the Titan Earthworm. Vaporeon matches up well against the Titan Cloth, the Fire Specialist Mila, and the Titan Bombardier if you teach it Icy Wind. As you move on later, Flareon's Fire Stab doesn't help much again until the Ice Gym, then the Steel Elite Four, while Vaporeon's Stab Water is good for the Ground Titan and the Ground Elite Four. But with coverage of ice moves and Shadow Ball for Vaporeon, then Dig and Trailblaze for Flareon, their usefulness can really expand. It's really close, but I'm giving the edge to Vaporeon simply because it's easier to use. The instant you evolve Eevee, it learns a special water move, whereas for Flareon to get a physical fire move before level 30, you have to either beat Mila or get the TM for Fire Fang or Flame Charge. By the way, side note here, Flareon could not learn Flame Charge from TM until version 2.0 of the game. Like, it was just a bug. Like, it could learn Flame Charge previously and they removed it. And they fixed it eventually, but like, come on, y'all. Scarlet and Violet, jeez. Vaporeon needs the Icy Wind TM to help against the Titan Bombardier, but you just have to beat Giacomo for the recipe, and he's right down the road. Like I said, I think all of them can be useful, but Vaporeon's just been a consistently strong Pokemon the whole time. This also means that Glaceon and Umbreon never got a win, but Pokemon clearly hates Glaceon, and Umbreon's just like, Dark's only good against Ghost and Psychic. It's just like not that much coverage.
Greetings, Spooky fans! Michael here, and today I'm going to be going over what I believe to be the best flyer in every single main series Pokemon game. Prior to Gen 7, because from Gen 7 onward, you can't use fly outside of battle, and so there are no flyers. A flyer is exactly what it sounds like. It is a Pokemon whose purpose is to use the move Fly, the HM move used for fast travel. Now, Fly is not necessary to complete any main series Pokemon games, but not having Fly in your party at all times is so incredibly inconvenient that most Pokemon players have a dedicated party member to use Fly. A flyer does not have to be useful in battle. Despite the laws of physics telling us otherwise, a level 3 Pidgey is just as capable of transporting a person around as a level 100 Dragonite. However, my goal is to find the best flyer in every game, which means it's not only capable of transporting you, but it's also gonna be a very valuable member of your battling team. So don't forget to subscribe to my channel, since, troublingly, less than half of my viewers are actually subscribed, and let's dive in to what I believe is the best flyer in every main series Pokemon game before Gen 7. First is Gen 1, Red and Blue. Just red and blue, not yellow. You'll see why in a bit. Now, some of you may be thinking that Charizard would be an excellent flyer for these games. After all, it's a starter, it's pretty strong, and it's well known for flying Ash around. However, I am sad to report that if you thought that, you have made a foolish miscalculation. Despite the giant freaking wings, Charizard cannot learn Fly in Red and Blue, one of the many oversights of the original games. We will have to look elsewhere. Some strong candidates are the legendary birds. All of them are very powerful as they are legendary, and all of them can learn Fly. Of the three, I believe Zapdos to be the strongest. Electric Flying is the best type combination of the three, since it doesn't have a 4x weakness like the other two, and actually only has 2 weaknesses total to Rock and Ice. Zapdos has a big drawback though, and that's that you can't get it before you get to Fly. The HM for Fly is obtained on the route just west of Celadon City, which only requires Cut for you to get to, which you will have by this point in the story. The badge required to use Fly is Lieutenant Surge's, who you could have skipped, but most players will not have. So assuming you go straight for Fly after getting out of the rock tunnel and then obtain it, the things that you then have to do before you can get to Zapdos are clear out the rocket hideout, fight through the Pokemon Tower, wake up a Snorlax, traverse to Fuchsia, go through the Safari Zone to get Surf, beat Koga, whose strongest Pokemon is 14 levels higher than Erica's, surf to the power plant, get through it, fight Zapdos, and catch it. Yeah, it's a lot. So while I do think Zapdos is the strongest and most capable Fly user, it would kind of stink to get Fly and then not be able to use it for a while until you get to Zapdos. So I want to recommend a flyer you can use in the interim, or just the one you can use for the rest of the playthrough if you don't want to use legendaries. For the non-legend flyer, I recommend Fearow. Fearow has a very solid 90 base attack and 100 base speed, stats that are not only superior to Pidgeot's, but reached at a far lower level since Spearow evolves at only level 20. The Pidgeot line also doesn't get a flying type attack until Wing Attack for Pidgeotto at 31, while Spearow starts with Peck. Peck is weaker than Wing Attack nowadays, but back in Gen 1, they had the same power, so that's a clear benefit for Spearow over Pidgey. As an extra bonus for Fearow, it gets Drill Peck at level 34. Drill Peck is the strongest flying type move in the game besides Sky Attack, and it's 100% accurate. something neither Fly nor Sky Attack can boast. Fearow is vastly superior to Pidgeot and any other fly-using Pokemon besides the legendary birds, so I recommend using Fearow up until you can get Zapdos, or just continue to use it. Next up is Yellow version, which is in the same situation as Red and Blue, but with one massive change. Charizard can learn Fly now. Not only that, but every single player can get Charizard, not just the ones who choose to start with Charmander. Now, I still think Zapdos is the best flyer, but who should you use before Zapdos? Charizard or Fearow? It's a really close call, but I had to give the edge to Fearow here. Here's why. In the stat department, they have the same speed, while Fearow has slightly better attack. Charizard has much better special to make use of its fire moves. Fearow is a bit frailer than Charizard as well. Charizard has a better base total, but a big reason for that is Fearow's poor special stat, a stat that it doesn't really care about, at least in regards to offense. For me, the stat department is a toss-up. For typing, Charizard has the advantage of being both a good fire type and a good flying type. Fearow is a better flying type thanks to Drill Peck and its better attack, but its normal coverage is less helpful since it can't deal super effective damage. It can take advantage of Hyper Beam though, which in Gen 1 has no recharge if it KOs. Again, another toss-up. But while I think it's a toss-up for these two Pokemon in the stat and typing department, Fearow wins in accessibility. Fearow will be a Fearow and will have access to Fly the instant you get the HM. Charizard can learn Fly, but Charmeleon cannot. And if you go straight for Fly without doing the Rocket Hideout or anything else like that, your team is probably gonna be in the mid-level 20s, which is quite a bit away from the level 36 required to evolve your Charmeleon into Charizard. For Charizard, you'll have to wait, but Fearow, you won't. So once again for Yellow, like with Red and Blue, the best flyer is Zapdos, with Fearow before that. Now on to Generation 2, Gold, Silver, and Crystal. This decision was a lot easier than Gen 1, since the best flyer is not only the best flyer, but it's just one of the best all-around team members. Kenya the Fearow. In my best team member in every game video, where I listed the Pokemon in each game that I thought would be the most valuable for the most playthrough teams, for the Gen 2 games, I named Kenya the Fearow as one of the runners-up to Alakazam. I did that because it has the same benefits it had in Gen 1, access to Drill Peck and reasonably solid stats and early accessibility. But a benefit Kenya has over other Fearow is that it's a traded Pokemon. Well, not really traded. Some guy asks you to deliver it to his friend and then you just don't. Is it Grand Theft Spearow, or is this guy just dumb for trusting a stranger? Regardless, the end result is that Kenya the Fearow does not have your original trainer value, which means it gets boosted experience, something that's extremely helpful in the Johto games with really weird level curves for a lot of the boss battles. So combine its boosted experience and the lack of competition from Charizard and Zapdos and all the benefits it had in Gen 1, and you've got a clear-cut winner for the best flyer in the Gen 2 games. Now we can move on to Gen 3, starting with the Hoenn games, Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. These games are interesting because Fly comes pretty late, not until you have 6 gym badges. That means our options for Fly users that are available before you get to that point is a lot. While you could go with Swellow, Pelipper, Altaria, Tropius, or Flygon, none of these are the best. In my opinion, the best option is Crobat for multiple reasons. The first is that Crobat has excellent stats, the best base stat total of all of these Pokemon with 535, including blazing speed and respectable 90 attack. Additionally, it's obtainable early, with Zubat being found in Granite Cave before you fight the second gym, and it evolves into the respectable base stat total Golbat at the pleasantly low level of 22. The evolution to Crobat is a friendship evolution, which, as we know, is annoying. Friendship it sucks. But in my opinion, it's worth it, because Zubat gets wing attack at level 21, then becomes Golbat at 22. So you have a decently powered flying type coverage up until getting Fly. even if for some reason it's not evolved by that point, which I would be genuinely surprised, Golbat can still learn Fly. I should probably mention Salamence and Rayquaza in Emerald are freaking fantastic flyers because they're stupid strong and actually learn Fly by level up, but I have to disqualify them here because you get them way too late. Not until after you have 8 badges. And with Salamence, you have 8 badges and then you have to go find like a level 25 Bagon and level it up all the way to 50. It's just, no, that takes too long. Crobat can fly around right away and contribute a lot in the process. Next up is Fire Red and Leaf Green, the remakes of the Gen 1 games. The only relevant for this video change is that Charizard is no longer accessible to everyone playing the game like it was in Yellow. Only people who pick Charmander can use Charizard. If you pick Charmander, use Charizard as your flyer. But if you don't pick Charmander, Fearow is still the one I recommend the most, with an asterisk saying that you can swap it for Zapdos later because Zapdos is pretty freaking good. Now on to Gen 4, which actually buffed Fly from 70 base power to 90. Therefore, having access to other better flying moves like Drill Peck matters a lot less. First are the Sinnoh games, Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. This choice is very easy because the best flyer is not just one of, it is the best team member, at least according to my video, in the Sinnoh games. That being Staraptor. Staraptor's stats are fantastic with base 100 speed and 120 attack. It will decimate most anything it outspeeds. Additionally, it's extremely accessible, with Starly being everywhere on the first few routes of the game and learning Wing Attack at the fabulously low level of 9. As icing on the cake, it can not only wreck things with its flying moves like Fly or Brave Bird, but it can also get some really nice stab return damage and has the coverage of close combat. The only reason to not use Staraptor on a Sinnoh playthrough team is because you've already done it before and you're changing it up. Staraptor is an incredible, amazing Pokemon that also just happens to be a flyer. Next is Heart Gold and Soul Silver, and like with the previous remakes, my answer is basically the same. Kenya the Fearow. Kenya the Fearow is not just still good, but I actually think it got better. It now gets Aerial Ace pretty early, which is nice, and it has access to more coverage moves. Plus, like I mentioned, Fly is stronger now. It of course still gets the boosted experience, and I just don't think there are any better flyers that early in the Johto games. Okay, an argument could be made for Crobat. As I previously discussed, Crobat is very good. However, Crobat, you have to deal with the friendship evolution, and it doesn't get boosted experience like Kenya does. So those are scores against Crobat, which is making me give Kenya the win. Now on to Generation 5, starting with Black and White, which are in a weird situation because they actually have pretty limited options for flyers. The options are so limited that the only ones available before the 7th gym are Unfezant, Woobat, Sigilyph, Archeops, and Swanna. Woobat has bad stats. Swanna is a water type which overlaps with Samurott if you pick it. Unfezant has stats comparable to Fearow, but the other options are better. That leaves us with Sigilyph and Archeops, and it's really hard to choose between these two. Sigilyph has solid stats, a great ability in Magic Guard, and can be obtained before you reach Fly. The drawback is that it's a special attacker, meaning Fly will be a dead move slot for it, since if you need to do flying damage, you should be using Air Slash. Archeops, on the other hand, has incredible stats and is a physical attacker, so can use Fly. It's well known to have the terrible drawback of Defeatist, which cuts its stats if its health gets below half, but in a playthrough that's much less of an issue since you can outspeed an Oko most anything you're up against. Archeops' biggest drawback is that only it can learn Fly, not its pre-evolution Arcan. This is a problem because by the time you get to Fly, your team is probably not gonna be around level 37, might even be like 10 levels lower depending on how much you leveled up. So you're gonna have to wait in order to be able to use an Archeops to fly. To be perfectly honest, I think both of these Pokemon are awesome to use on Black and White playthrough teams. I've used both of them myself at various points and had a lot of fun with both. And I can't really pick one over the other. Archeops is better in battle, but you have to wait for it. Sigilyph isn't quite as strong, but you don't have to wait. So I think I'm giving this one a tie. Just pick whichever one's secondary typing matches up better with the rest of your team. The sequel games Black 2 and White 2 changed things up a bit though. A big change is that Archeops is no longer an option. The location where you revive fossils, Nacrene City, is now a post-game location. Additionally, 3 new flyers are now available. Well, 3 total, 2 in each game. Crobat and Mandibuzz in Black 2, then Crobat and Braviary in White 2. Okay, there's also Volcarona, but Volcarona is not only a special attacker, which is not a great Pokemon to use Fly on, but it's also not a flying type, so it doesn't get stabbed from Fly, and you really shouldn't be teaching your Volcarona Fly. Crobat is available now because Zubat is found in the Castelia sewers, and Mandibuzz and Braviary are available thanks to the weekly overworld spawn of them on Route 4. Mandibuzz in Black 2 on Thursdays, and Braviary in White 2 on Mondays. This is the only way to get these 2 bird Pokemon at a reasonable point in the story. Rufflet and Vullaby are like the route before the league, and they don't even evolve until like level 54 anyways. If you want to use these Pokemon, you gotta do this weekly event. Unfortunately, like with Black and White, it's tough to make this decision. Crobat is great for the reasons I already discussed in previous generations. It's fast as hell and hits pretty hard. Mandibuzz and Braviary are also very good Pokemon, with very solid stats right from the start thanks to catching them already evolved. Mandibuzz being fantastic defensively, and Braviary being less bulky but a bit quicker and hitting much harder. And of course, Sigilyph is still an option. But while it's close, I'm able to pick a winner this time. And I'm going with the birds, Mandibuzz for Black 2 and Braviary for White 2. I picked them because Crobat has to deal with the friendship evolution, which is, as I mentioned, annoying. And so Mandibuzz and Braviary, you just get them and they're already evolved. Also, I gave him the win over Sigilyph because of what I mentioned before about Fly being a physical move and Sigilyph being a special attacker. Mandibuzz and Braviary are both really strong, solid Pokemon that will be very effective flyers for your team. I actually haven't used them in a Black 2 or White 2 playthrough yet, and I should get on that. Now on to Generation 6, starting with X and Y, and dear God, there are so many options. One thing I will say though is that Charizard, very solid option. It will be fully evolved by the time you get to Fly, and its 2 different Megas are freaking incredible, whether you go with the special one or the physical one. If you wanna use Charizard, make it your flyer, for sure. But what about people who don't wanna use Charizard, or any Kanto starter at all for that matter? Well, for you, I'm recommending Staraptor. Crobat is another great option, but the friendship evolution is pretty inconvenient compared to Staraptor's immediate access with easy leveling up. Hawlucha is also another solid option, but its fighting typing overlaps with Chestnut and Mega Lucario. Staraptor will be very strong and fast flying coverage that doesn't have those 2 limitations, and you can get it before the fighting gym. Finally is Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, and like with the other remakes, the answer is the same as the originals, Crobat. I know I've railed on Crobat's friendship evolution, but in the Hoenn games, the other options are pretty underwhelming. Plus, the time between getting the Zubat and getting Fly is so large that you shouldn't have to cram for the friendship evolution. You'll have a Crobat by then, I'm like 98% sure. Although it's worthy to note that Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire really started the trend of not needing a flyer anymore, because once you get the Eon Flute, you really don't need a flyer anymore. It's slower, but it's also pretty fun. Greetings, Boogie fans! Michael here, and in-game trades have been a staple of the mainline Pokemon games ever since the beginning. They allow players to experience trading even if another person isn't available, and they allow you to get some Pokemon with traded benefits without actually having to trade. But not all in-game trades are created equal. Looking at you, Mindy, and your Gasper the Hunter that's holding an Everstone. Today I will be going over what I believe to be the best in-game trade in every single main series Pokemon game, with best defined as which one provides you with a Pokemon that will be most useful to you for a playthrough. Therefore, post-game trades don't matter because they don't help you in your playthrough. Your playthrough is done. Also, it doesn't matter if a Pokemon is only obtainable through an in-game trade if the Pokemon is weak. If it's not good to you for anything other than a dex entry, then it's not the best. So don't forget to subscribe to my channel, since 60% of my viewers are not subscribed, which is darkness. And let's dive into what I believe to be the best in-game trade in every Pokemon game. We'll start with Generation 1, Red and Blue. We'll cover Yellow in a bit, but not right now because it actually has different in-game trades. Here are all the in-game trades for Red and Blue. Several of these Pokemon are only obtained via their in-game trade, but like I mentioned, that doesn't affect my opinion. The first one I considered naming is the Abra for the Mr. Mime as the best. The reason I thought that might be the best is because Alakazam, absolutely a superior Psychic type Pokemon compared to Mr. Mime. But for those players who cannot trade, I thought Mr. Mime might be superior to Kadabra. Nowadays it is, but in the Gen 1 stat system, Kadabra was the superior Pokemon due to having better special and speed. As for the rest of the trades, the Pokemon Lab ones aren't phenomenal and have the drawback of being pretty late. The Nidoran line trades are basically trading the same Pokemon for the same Pokemon, so that's not anything special. And then Lickitung and Farfetch'd are just bad Pokemon. That leaves Poliwhirl for Lola the Jinx, which is actually a pretty solid trade. Jinx has solid stats with 95 in both special and speed. Neither are stellar, but like I said, both are quite solid. What makes Jinx special is its ice typing, and the fact that it gets a solid power ice stab move, Ice Punch, at level 31. That means you can use that valuable ice damage against Erica, Giovanni, and the big one, Lance, whose Dragonairs are only weak to ice because there's no dragon moves that can deal super effective damage in Gen 1. For more on that, check out my Dragon Types Then vs. Now video. So Jinx can give you stab ice type offense, which is valuable and very hard to find, but it's also a psychic type, which is extremely broken in Generation 1. You do have to use a TM to teach it psychic, but if you do, you can use it against Koga, Bruno, and Agatha. As for the Poliwhirl you'll need for the trade, it's not super tough to get. As soon as you get the Super Rod, accessible on Route 12 once you've moved Snorlax, you can catch a Poliwhirl easily by fishing on Route 10 or Celadon City. So in my opinion, Lola the Jinx is the best in-game trade Pokemon in Red and Blue. There are better Psychic type options, namely Alakazam, but it's the Psychic type in Gen 1, having two of them is probably beneficial rather than detrimental, and also the ice typing, as I said, is super valuable. But now we'll move on to Yellow version, and the list of in-game trades is actually very different. In fact, only one of them gets you the same Pokemon, the Mr. Mime, but you send a different Pokemon. And yes, you can get a Dugong instead of a Seal in Red and Blue, but you send a totally different Pokemon. But regardless of all the differences of this new list, there is a clear winner in my eyes. Ricky the Machoke. Ricky is the best in-game trade Pokemon in Yellow because, yes, you are sent a Machoke, which evolves by trading and will evolve, so you can get a Machamp from an in-game trade, which is incredible. To do the trade, you need a Cubone, which is found in the Pokemon Tower. It's got a low encounter rate in Yellow and only found on a few floors that I'm pretty sure you can't access properly until you get the Sylph Scope, but it's worth it in my opinion. It means you could get a Machamp before you even have 4 badges and without having to worry about trading with any other real people. Like, what? We don't need friends. Ricky the Machamp is a very strong Pokemon that you can obtain very early, so to me that makes it clearly the best in-game trade in Yellow version. Now on to Generation 2, Gold, Silver, and Crystal. Now Crystal has a different list of in-game trades than Gold and Silver, but I'm lumping these all together because my answer is the same for all 3 games. Here are the in-game trades for all 3 Johto games, and while the later game trades change for Crystal, the early game ones are mostly the same. The first is a Bellsprout for Rocky the Onix. This is a great trade as Onix has the type advantage over the first 2 gyms, the Flying Gym and Bug Gym, and then it resists all of the attacks of Whitney's Miltank. If you're willing to put in the work to get a Metal Coat and then trade to evolve it, it can become a reliable team member for the long haul as a Steelix. I heavily considered naming this the best in-game trade, but I think there's one that's just a bit better. Muscle the Machop. The Pokemon you send is either a Drowsy or an Abra depending on the game, but the trait is effectively the same since Drowsy and Abra are found similarly easily on the route just south of Goldenrod, and Goldenrod is where the trait happens. Muscle the Machop is fantastic because it's super helpful against Whitney. And Whitney is the toughest gym leader in Johto, according to the votes that I received for my toughest gym leader in every game video. Machop is extra helpful because the Miltank is only weak to fighting, and your fighting type options are extremely limited this early in the game in a Johto playthrough. I'm pretty sure your only other option is Heracross, which is a bit of a challenge to find, and even if you get one, the only fighting move it could learn around that level is the disgustingly weak Rock Smash. As an added bonus, Muscle is female and therefore cannot be attracted by Miltank. It makes the toughest battle in the game a lot more manageable, and then if you're able to trade, you can keep using it throughout the game as a fast experience gaining Machamp, which is really strong. Also, the guy who gives you the Machop's name is Mike. Ha! Clearly someone very benevolent and trustworthy. So Muscle the Machop is the best in-game trade in Gen 2, but Rocky the Onix is a close second, and I actually recommend using both of them. In my first ever playthrough of Gen 2, which I did here on my channel, I used both of them on my team, and they were awesome. Now on to Generation 3, starting with the Hoenn Games Ruby and Sapphire, and oh my god, they had nothing. This is the entire in-game trade list for Ruby and Sapphire, clearly far shorter than the previous generations. Of these three trades, the best is the Makuhita, named Makit. Makit? Make it? I don't know. The Makuhita is the only useful Pokemon you can receive. The Skitty and Corsola come way too late in the game and are also just not very good Pokemon. To be fair, these in-game trades are clearly intended to be used as contest Pokemon. They all come with one of their contest stats boosted really high. However, that's not the ranking system I'm using for this video. I care about how good the Pokemon is on a playthrough team, and Skitty and Corsola are not good, and Makuhita is actually pretty solid. Hariyama is a great team member if you don't pick Blaziken, since the fighting type is useful for a lot of the big battles, particularly the most challenging gym leader, Norman. By doing this in-game trade, you can get Makuhita earlier than otherwise, and have one that will get boosted experience. Slackoth isn't super easy to find in the forest, but it certainly is findable, and the trade is doable. So the Makuhita is the best in-game trade Pokemon in Ruby and Sapphire, partially because it's the only good one, and partially because it's a good Pokemon. But then we move on to Emerald, and none of them are good. There are once again only 3 trades available before the league, the Meowth one being post-game. Horsey requires a Bagon, a Pokemon you can't catch until you have Waterfall, and 8 badges, so it might as well be post-game. Plusle is a bad Pokemon, so all that leaves is Dots the Seedot as the best by default, but even then it's not great. Shiftry isn't a stellar Pokemon for a playthrough in Gen 3, due to Nuzleaf having a severely limited level up moveset, meaning you have to use TMs for it to be effective, and TMs broke in this game. Also, Shiftry's best attacking stat is its physical attack, and Grass and Dark moves are all special in Gen 3. It's not god-awful, but in my opinion, there are better Grass and or Dark type options. And also, I don't know if it's worth trading away a Ralts for. Gardevoir is pretty good, and Ralts isn't that easy to find. I don't know if I recommend this trade, but I certainly recommend it more than all of the other ones. Next up is Fire Red and Leaf Green, whose list of in-game trades is almost identical to Red and Blue's. So my answer is the same, sort of. This is the list of all of them, and at the top you'll notice is Abra for Mr. Mime once again. If you recall, I considered this as the best trade in Red and Blue in order to consider players who cannot trade, since Alakazam is better than Mr. Mime, but I thought Mr. Mime might be better than Kadabra. In Gen 1, Mr. Mime was not better than Kadabra, but in Gen 3, it absolutely is. Due to the stat system change, Mr. Mime now has a much better base stat total than Kadabra. So if you want a strong, fast Psychic type and can't get Alakazam, this trade is the way to go. As an added bonus, Mimian the Mr. Mime has a timid nature, which lowers its not as useful physical attack stat and boosts its speed stat. That's a great nature for a Mr. Mime. However, if you can trade and can get an Alakazam, Alakazam is strictly better than Mr. Mime in most every way. So in that case, the best trade is the same one as before, Poliwhirl for Jinx, but this time the Jinx is named Zinx. This Jinx is the best for the same reasons as before. The Ice-type stab is very helpful and hard to find in Kanto, and it can be used as a Psychic-type Pokemon if you use the TM, and even after all of the nerfs the Psychic-type got in Gen 2, it's still really good in Gen 3 due to the lack of strong bug types, the singular Ghost type that is weak to Psychic, and the complete absence of Dark types. So even if you can get Alakazam, again, you might still consider using Jinx too. So essentially, if you have access to Alakazam, you should use it, and then supplement it with Jinx. However, if you don't have access to Alakazam, use Mr. Mime. And then also, potentially supplement it with Jinx. Now on to Generation 4, starting with the Sinnoh games Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum, the games with the infamous Everstone Haunter trade. Obviously, that will not be the best one. Like with the Hoenn games, there are not very many trades in these games, and it's actually easy to eliminate all but one. Gaspar is, of course, terrible, and Magikarp is post-game. That leaves Cherub the Chatot and Kaza the Abra, and Abra is strictly better. Chatot only has a base stat total of 411, while the Abra can become Alakazam, which is much stronger, obviously. Even if you're not able to trade and evolve Kaza into an Alakazam, the Kadabra form of Kaza is still useful to you. Yes, it has a lower base stat total than Chatot, but it's got 120 special attack and 100 speed, which is incredible, especially that early in the game. It's just more useful to you than a middle-of-the-road Chatot. Also, yes, Gaspar the Hunter does have a similar base stat total to a Kadabra, but it's obtained so late in the game, by that time, what's the point? You'd want a Gengar by that time anyways. As for the Pokemon you send, which is Machop, it's super easy to find, just north of Orberg on Route 207. I'm not saying this trade is incredible, but it's not bad, and it's certainly better than the few other options. Next up is Heart Gold and Soul Silver. The in-game trade list for these games is a mix of the various trades in all three of the Gen 2 games, plus some extras. However, my answer is the same as it was for Gen 2, Muscle the Machop. I won't delve into all the reasoning because it's the same as it was in Gen 2. It's very useful against Whitney, the most challenging gym leader in the game. I should mention though that Heracross now has good fighting moves, actually getting Brick Break at level 19, which is incredible. Therefore, due to its much better stats, Heracross is better for the Whitney fight than Machop. However, up to this point in the game, you can only find Heracross at a maximum level of 5. So you'd have to do quite a bit of grinding to catch it up to the rest of your team, since you can't find Heracross until you can headbutt trees. So if you intend to use Heracross on your team for the rest of the playthrough, I say go for it. But otherwise, just doing an easy trade for the Machop is probably easier. Now on to Generation 5, starting with Black and White. In my opinion, none of these trades are particularly impressive. There are better water options than Basculin. Rotom and Munchlax are post-game, and so that leaves Emolga and the two grass types that the trade depends on the version. Emolga's electric typing is useful for the flying gym, but that's all it's got going for it. Its base stat total is pretty low for a fully evolved Pokemon, and the trade happens decently late in the game, around the 6th gym, the flying gym. Meanwhile, the Petalil Cottony trade is very early in the game, and you send the one found in your game in exchange for the one not in your game. These two trades are the best because they allow you to get a boosted experience grass type that can become a really solid member of your team once it evolves. Lilligant in black or Whimsicott in white. Also, they have modest natures, which is a fantastic nature for these Pokemon since they have good special attack stats. The trait isn't freaking incredibly broken or anything, but you can get a pretty solid boosted experience grass type for your squad, and that's better than the other options. Next is Black 2 and White 2, which have pretty different trades. I should mention there's some long lists of in-game trades you can do with Yancey or Curtis, but those are post-game, so not going to consider them here. These are the rest of them, and the same Petalil and Cottony trade is available, just in a different location. Tangrowth comes too late in the game, so it's down to the Petalil Cottony trade or sending in a Mulga for a Gigalith. If you are capable of training, then the Petalil Cottony trade is still the best. Gigalith is a fantastically strong Pokemon and really awesome. I love the thing, but the trade itself is kinda late, and also getting Emolga is a bit tedious. You can only find it in the rustling grass, which is an annoying process. If you can trade and want to use Gigalith, I recommend just catching a Boldore earlier in the game and evolving it immediately with the trading, rather than waiting until around the 6th gym to do this in-game trade. But if you cannot trade, it's worth it for the Gigalith. It's got an adamant nature which boosts its physical attack, which is awesome, and it can be used right before the flying gym, and it's just a huge base stat total Pokemon you wouldn't be able to get otherwise because it's a trade evolution. So in short, if you can trade, the Petalil Cottony trades. If you cannot, then grab the Gigalith. Now on to Generation 6, starting with X and Y. This is the list of all the trades, and one stands out far more than the others and is the clear best. Love Disc for Steelix. Love Disc for Steelix. In the second gym town, Sillage City, you can easily find Love Disc with a 100% encounter rate using the Old Rod. Then you can immediately trade it for a huge base stat total Steelix, and it already comes evolved, so you don't need to worry about trade evolutions or a metal coat. Then you can immediately use the Steelix for the rock type gym, since steel and ground are both good against rock. You'll probably want to teach it Bulldoze. Doesn't really learn a whole lot of ground moves by level up, but the Bulldoze TM is in Lumio, so you can buy it as soon as you're there. Then Steelix continues to be useful against the electric, fairy, and ice gyms, half the gyms total, including the rock one. It blows my mind that you can send over an almost completely useless and very easy to find Love Disc in exchange for a Steelix that is very powerful, and you get it at level 20 very early in the game. It's crazy. This might be the most one-sided in-game trade in the entire main series. Shout out to Thumper the Steelix for just being basically a gift Pokemon. Next up is Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. The trade list is effectively the same as Ruby and Sapphire, so my answer is the same. Slackoth for Makuhita, whose name I'm still not sure how to pronounce. I think it's Makeet, because Makuhita, but it looks like just make it? I don't know. Now on to Generation 7, starting with Sun and Moon. This is the list of trades in Sun and Moon, and for me the trickiest call is between Machop and Bounsweet, since both are immediately useful for their immediately following trial. I thought it over though, and I'm giving this one to Bouncy the Bounsweet. The wishy-washy trial can be challenging, and having a Steenie, which Bouncy should be before you do the trial, will help a lot. It can continue to be useful as a Czarina, especially since it has an adamant nature boosting its great attack. Also, it comes with a Bright Powder, a very useful item, especially for frail Pokemon. Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon changes the list up though. These are all the in-game trades in the Ultra games, and the choice is simple for me. Chaw the Hawlucha. I talk about this in more detail in my best team member in every game video, but Hawlucha is freaking incredible in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. It's got a great base stat total that's really nice to have that early, and it has super effective stab against the vast majority of the in-game battles. The fact you can get one of the best Pokemon in the game so early with a boosted experience is incredible. Next up is Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee, and they totally change up the list of in-game traits from previous Kanto games. These ones are all Alola forms. These are all the in-game trades in the Let's Go games, and the list is simply the Cantonian Pokemon for the Alolan Pokemon with a few version differences and exclusives. To me, the best contenders on this list are immediately the Dark types. As I mentioned earlier in the video, despite all the nerfs to the Psychic type in Gen 2, it remains a dominant type in Kanto playthroughs because there are no Dark types, there's only one Ghost type and it's weak to Psychic, and most of the Bug types are pretty weak. Therefore, being able to get a Dark type is super valuable, so the Dark type Alola forms are the most valuable. Therefore, the best trade in Let's Go Pikachu is the Alolan Grimer, and the best trade in Let's Go Eevee is the Alolan Persian. I do think Alolan Muck is a bit of a better Pokemon than Persian, but they're both gonna be really useful to you, especially since you can get them before you fight Sabrina. You just have to get the surfing replacement from Fuchsia, and then surf to Cinnabar and find the trade guy there. An honorable mention though goes to Alolan Raticate, which is also a Dark type. It's much weaker than the other two, but you can get it way earlier in the game, so I recommend tossing it on your team, at least in the interim, to deal with Psychic types before you can get the better Dark types. Finally is Generation 8 Sword and Shield, and I should say I will not be including the Isle of Armor Galarian form for not Galarian form trades. Not everybody has the DLC, and her location and timing and offerings are very inconsistent depending on the day, and it just didn't make sense to include them. This is the list of main game in-game trades in Sword and Shield, and of all of these, I think Snips the Togepi is the best. It has a timid nature, which is fantastic for Togekiss, and Togekiss is just an extremely powerful Pokemon that will be super useful to you. Togepi does evolve by friendship, which can be a bit annoying, however, it's gonna get boosted experience. The most efficient way to raise a Pokemon's friendship is to hand it the Soothe Bell and then level it up a lot with experience candy. If it gets boosted experience, you're gonna be able to evolve that Togepi even faster. As for the Toxel you have to provide, you could send the one you got from the daycare, but also it's not too tough to find a wild one in the wild area or on Route 7. So there we have it. Those are what I believe to be the best in-game trades in every main series Pokemon game. Happy trading, but make sure you don't level them up too fast and make it so they don't listen to what you have to say. Greetings, Pokey fans! Michael here, and a few months ago, I made a video going over which starter was the best one to pick for every main series Pokemon game in regards to how well it matched up against its particular game. This video will be a similar concept, but instead of the best starter, it's the best Pokemon in addition to your starter. I will be going over what I believe to be the best Pokemon to have on a playthrough team alongside your starter in every main series Pokemon game. For a Pokemon to be selected as the best, it must be obtained relatively early and easily, match up well against a lot of the big battles in the game, and of course, be a strong and useful Pokemon. Also, my goal is to find Pokemon that are useful no matter which starter you pick. So because of that, I will be intentionally excluding any grass, fire, or water type Pokemon, plus electric or normal if it's one of the games where that is the starter type. And I think this goes without saying, but just in case, this will be my opinion. Which Pokemon is the best for this is a subjective thing, since there's no way to know for sure with a mathematical method or formula. I can assure you though, my decisions are based on hard data, like their stats, movesets, location, etc., not just on which Pokemon species I happen to personally like. So don't forget to subscribe to my channel, tap that bell for notifications, you know the thing. And let's get started with Generation 1, the games being Red, Blue, and Yellow. And for these, I narrowed it down to 2 Pokemon. The first is Nidoking. You can get Nidoran Male very early on Route 22 next to Viridian before you even enter Viridian Forest,
and since it evolves into Nidorino early, and the Moonstone is obtained early in Mount Moon, you can get a Nidoking very early. Its level up moveset is atrocious, but its TM move pool is so wide that you can easily make up for that. Nidoking is actually the Gen 1 speedrun Pokemon of choice since it can be so strong so early, learning Thrash at just level 23. Combine that with its ability to learn Horn Drill, an OHKO move you can make always hit with a times accuracy, and you've got a Pokemon that can sweep through a lot. However, Nidoking has a few drawbacks. They're not huge ones, but they're worth mentioning. The first is that, as I said, it needs TMs to have good moves, aside from Thrash and I guess Horn Drill too. So that kind of is gonna burn through your TM reservoir. Since TMs are one use, then done. Also, it's a poison type, which is not great. Poison is pretty much not useful offensively since most grass types are also poison types, and it makes it overlap with Venusaur if you pick Venusaur. Like I said, these aren't huge drawbacks. Nidoking is still great and I think worth using, but there's one Pokemon that I think is a bit better than Nidoking in Gen 1, and that Pokemon is Alakazam. Alakazam is a psychic type, which by nature makes it overpowered in Gen 1. I won't go into too much detail about this since I've discussed it a lot in videos lately, but in short, the psychic type was amazing because it had effectively no weaknesses. The dark type didn't exist, psychic was immune to ghost in Gen 1, and the bug moves were so weak they may as well not have been there. So a psychic type, you should probably have one on your team in Gen 1 no matter what it is. But Alakazam specifically is the best non-legendary psychic type out there. It's the strongest. There are a few that technically have higher base stat totals, Starmie, Exeggutor, and Hypno, but Alakazam has the highest special stat and highest speed stat of all of them, which, in my opinion, are the most important stats for a psychic type. Side note, in Gen 1, special attack and special defense were just one stat, so Alakazam's massive base 135 special stat means it hit like a truck and took special hits extremely well. It doesn't take physical attacks well, but it's so fast and hits so hard that it's just gonna outspeed an OHKO most of the time anyways. It's also extremely accessible. Abra can be found before you get your second badge, and while switch training it to evolve into a Kadabra is a bit annoying, once it evolves, you can make it an Alakazam immediately since it evolves by trading. So you can have an Alakazam at level 16, and it'll have Confusion right away and continue learning better and better psychic moves as it levels up. Yes, it does require trading to evolve, but honestly, I don't think that should be a disqualifying factor, since if you're playing on a ROM, you can get around that, and if you're playing on the Virtual Console, you can do the trading with the Virtual Console versions. If you're playing on a legit cartridge on an old Game Boy, you might have more trouble. But honestly, Kadabra is still pretty good. It's just a slightly less good Alakazam. In short, Alakazam is very strong, very fast, easily accessible, and has the best typing in the game, the most broken a type has ever been. It is wildly helpful for any Gen 1 team. Next up is Generation 2, the games being Gold, Silver, and Crystal. And the best team member, in my opinion, is still Alakazam. Although first, I suppose I should mention my two runner-ups. Runners-up. I'm not sure which one. Anyways, those two are Kenya the Spearow and Ampharos. Kenya is the Spearow that you're supposed to take to some guy's friend, but you are completely capable of just holding on to it and committing Grand Theft Spearow. Kenya is great because it's a strong flying type with access to the best single-turn flying move in the game, Drill Peck, and it's technically a traded Pokemon, meaning it gets boosted experience, which is wildly helpful. Its normal typing can also come in handy against the occasional ghost-type foes. Ampharos is also very good. Its electric typing helps out in a lot of places, and it's found extremely early, allowing you to have super effective damage against the first gym and the second gym's strongest Pokemon, Scyther. It also matches up well against several later game battles, and being an electric type means it only has one weakness. Unfortunately, it's not available in Crystal, but in my opinion, neither are as widely useful as Alakazam. Now, Alakazam did get some nerfs between Gens 1 and 2 that I should cover. The Dark type is now a thing, it lost its immunity to Ghost and is weak to it instead, and its special stat was split into Special Attack and Special Defense, resulting in a drop to its Special Defense. The Bug type was still mostly garbage though, so that's still not much of a problem. But the buffs that Alakazam got in Gen 2 more than outweigh the nerfs in my opinion. Fearow and Ampharos excel at their particular types. Alakazam can excel at several. Fearow's only physical coverage moves are the 20 base power Mud Slap and Steel Wing, which is risky coverage since it's only good against the types that Fearow is weak to. Ampharos's only special coverage move is Fire Punch, which is good but very limited. Meanwhile, Alakazam can learn all 3 elemental punches, which nowadays are useless on it since they're physical moves, but back then they were special moves, which means they can take advantage of Alakazam's incredible base 135 special attack. This coverage is so good that literally not a single Pokemon in the game resists all 4 of those types. And incredibly, the elemental punches are TMs you can buy in the Goldenrod department store. You can catch Abra right outside of Goldenrod, and like before, trading evolves Kadabra right away, which means you can have an Alakazam with Confusion, Thunder Punch, Ice Punch, and Fire Punch at the absurdly low level of 16. That incredible coverage of strong moves, and you'll only replace Confusion with better psychic moves as it levels up, means that you can just body most of the game with just Alakazam. Its psychic typing sweeps through Team Rocket's poison types, Morty's poison ghosts, Chuck's fighting types, Koga's poison types, and Bruno's fighting types. Its coverage is also incredible, giving it super effective moves for at least one member of every single Johto Gym Leader or Elite Four members team, other than Whitney, but Whitney's gonna suck no matter what you use. Like I said, Kenya and Ampharos are still very good and absolutely worth using in my opinion. But Alakazam's incredible power and speed and move pool and the fact that you can have it at such a low level makes it the best by a sizable margin in my opinion. Yes, it is still a trade evolution, but hey, like I said, you can get around that. And also Kadabra is still very good. It's got like base 120 special attack and 105 speed, which isn't as good, but that's still great. Next is Generation 3, starting with the Hoenn games, Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. And these games don't have as much of a standout Pokemon like the first 2 generations did. Well, they do, but it's a starter, Swampert. Swampert is amazing in these games, but obviously I'm not picking a starter in this situation. A Pokemon that is not my pick for best team member, but I think should be mentioned is Hariyama. It's obtainable very early, and the fighting type is excellent for many battles in the game. I might have picked Hariyama as the best team member for this video, if not for Blaziken, because Blaziken is a fighting type, so if you choose Torchic, there's really no reason for you to pick Hariyama. Although, I heavily recommend it if you pick Trico or Mudkip though. My selection for these games is a Pokemon that is really important no matter which starter you pick, and that is Manectric. The electric type is basically a necessity in Hoenn, because after all, water is everywhere, and grass cannot handle all water types on its own. Manectric is your best option for an electric type because not only does it have very solid special attack and speed, but it's also the earliest accessible electric type, being found between the 2nd and 3rd gyms. Okay, technically Plusle and Minun are also found in the same spot, but dear God, do not use them. In addition to having electric attacking power, it also comes with Thunder Wave right away, which is always helpful, especially for catching other team members later. Bite is not the most stellar coverage move, but at least it uses Manectric's superior special attack stat in this gen. Manectric has the best time in Emerald because you fight both Juan and Wallace, but it's still gonna be super useful in all 3 Hoenn games because water and flying types are everywhere. You need an electric type, and Manectric is the best one. Next up is Fire Red and Leaf Green, the first remakes in this video. Now, in most of my something in every game videos, the answer for the remakes is the same as the originals. But that is not the case here, because Alakazam got worse. while Nidoking got better. The reason for Alakazam getting worse is that the nerfs to Alakazam between Gens 1 and 2 were balanced out by Alakazam getting the 3 elemental punches in Gen 2. However, in Fire Red and Leaf Green, it can't learn them at all. Alakazam's Fire Red Leaf Green coverage is limited to just Shockwave and Thief. I mean, there are other physical moves, but physical moves don't matter for Alakazam. Now, don't get me wrong, I still heavily recommend using Alakazam. The Psychic type is still incredible in the Kanto region due to the underwhelming Bug types and complete lack of Dark types, and it's still a very powerful Pokemon you can get at a very low level. It's just not my pick for the best one anymore, because it's not as ridiculously overpowered as it was before. Meanwhile, Nidoking, which already had a fantastic move pool, has an even better one in Gen 3, and it can take advantage of all of these attacks since its physical and special attack are both solid. It learns water, ice, fighting, fire, steel, electric, ground, ghost, poison, rock, dark, and normal moves, plus the only good bug move at the time, Mega Horn. That is at least one attack from 13 of the 17 types at the time. That is absurd. Combine that with its all-around solid stats and the fact you can, again, get one as low as level 16, and you have just a freaking incredibly versatile Pokemon. Yes, it's still a poison type, which overlaps with Venusaur, and yes, you're probably gonna have to use single-use TMs on it, but those are the only cons, and the pros of it vastly outweigh the cons in my opinion. Nidoking, you can use it for pretty much any major battle if you make its move pool right, which you can. Now on to Generation 4, starting with the Sinnoh games, Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. And for me, this choice was easy, Staraptor. Every pre-Gen 7 team needs a flyer, and Staraptor is not only the best flyer option in Sinnoh, but it's also just freaking incredible, period. First off, it's accessible. You literally can catch Starly in the first route of the game. Secondly, it has fantastic stats. Base 120 physical attack and 100 speed is very good. And it's not super frail either. Finally, it has access to the moves it needs to dominate. Fly was buffed to 90 base power in Gen 4, so you can do big damage with that, or another flying move like Aerial Ace or Brave Bird. It of course can devastate enemies with Stab Return, but then it also gets Close Combat, the best fighting move in the game, which allows it to take out Rock and Ice types, 2 of its 3 weaknesses. Basically, if you're not using a Staraptor in Sinnoh, you're doing something wrong. Or you've already used one before and you want to change it up, which is fair, but still, you should be using Staraptor. Next is Heart Gold and Soul Silver, and like with Fire Red and Leaf Green, I'm not keeping my answer the same between the originals and the remakes. So Alakazam has been dethroned. Alakazam is still very solid, but it's got the same issues it had in Fire Red and Leaf Green. Not much coverage. The elemental punches are now post-game move tutors, not early game TMs, but even if they were early game TMs, they're physical now, so they're useless on Alakazam. Plus, Dark types are in the Johto region, and the Bug type is not bad anymore, so Alakazam is really hurting in Gen 4. It's still very good. It's a solid Psychic type, but it's definitely not OP anymore. So to me, it makes sense to swap out Alakazam for one of my 2 original runner-ups. Runners-up. Still don't know. Kenya the Fearow or Ampharos. Both of these Pokemon got some pretty substantial buffs between Gen 2 and Gen 4. Fearow now has access to stronger Fly, Aerial Ace at a pretty low level, and a few other coverage moves like U-Turn. Ampharos now gets Discharge not long after evolving, plus the coverage moves of Signal Beam and Power Gem. Both of these Pokemon hit pretty hard. Fearow is just faster, and Ampharos is bulkier. Both of these Pokemon are excellent, and I definitely recommend using them, but I think I have to give the edge to Ampharos because of how absurdly early you can get it, before you even fight Falkner. You can use it for super effective damage in his gym right away, then against Bugsy's Scyther, then use it to paralyze Whitney's Miltank, which is very helpful and I highly recommend doing that, which means that this Pokemon is at least partially helpful in all 3 of the first 3 gyms. It continues to be helpful later, particularly against Claire and Lance, and once it gets Signal Beam, that's some really nice bug-type coverage. Also, it only has one weakness, which is nice. Ampharos is not as much of a standout as Alakazam was in Gen 2, but it is still a staple member of any Johto team. I still recommend Kenya and Alakazam though, it's just Ampharos is, I think, the best one. Now on to Generation 5, starting with Black and White. And one thing I want to say up front is that I think your team should have a fighting type, like Conkeldurr or Sock or Scrafty. However, I can't select any of these Pokemon as the best member for any starter because of Emboar. It doesn't make sense to use one of these fighting types if you've picked Emboar. But you should use a fighting type if you don't pick Emboar. The Pokemon I decided on is Excadrill. You can get Drillbur very early, before the second gym, and its ground typing is helpful against Elisa. Then once it evolves into Excadrill, it becomes very versatile and useful. It either resists or is immune to 11 of the 17 types, and it has very diverse coverage that lets it be useful against a lot of big important plot battles. Combine those benefits with a monstrous attack stat, decent bulk, and great HP, and you've got a fantastic Pokemon on your squad. I do want to mention that Crocodile is also a very useful Pokemon here. I just gave the edge to Excadrill because its Steel typing is really helpful defensively. Now on to Black 2 and White 2, and a Pokemon I want to mention up front that is not my pick here is Lucario. Riolu is available before the first gym, and if you devote the effort to raising its friendship, you can have a Lucario very early, which is fantastic. Lucario is not only strong, but the fighting and steel types are both very good in the Unova region. However, like in Black and White, a fighting type Pokemon overlaps with Emboar, and therefore, it doesn't make sense to use Lucario if you pick Tepig. Since Lucario is not a smart choice for all three starters, it can't be my selection here. Although I think it would be the best if Emboar was not a fighting type. But since I can't go with Lucario, I'm going with another steel type. This time, Magnezone. Magnemite can be caught before the second gym, which is very early, so it can be a reliable team member close to right off the bat. While it's not strong against poison, it is immune to it, making it useful against Roxy immediately. Additionally, since the electric field location is timed quite nicely, your Magnemite will likely have just become a Magneton when you get there, so you can turn it into its strongest form, which has incredible stats, immediately. Another reason it's great is because the steel electric typing is very good. Electric is of course strong against Skyla and Marlin, but Magnezone resists the primary attacking type for every single gym leader except Clay. Excadrill is still pretty solid, but you get it later in the game now, plus the swapping of a gym leader that it was strong against, Bryson, for a gym leader that it's weak against, Marlin, hurts it a lot in my opinion. Magnezone will be an effective wall for you for many different battles, plus it gets Thunder Wave early, which is always nice, and it hits like a truck. Next up is Generation 6, starting with X and Y, and an honorable mention I want to say up front is Talonflame. It's got great stats, available very early on, very solid Pokemon. However, it's a fire type, and in X and Y you have 2 different chances to select a fire type starter, so chances are high that its fire typing will be redundant. Therefore, it is not a good pick, no matter your starter. To me, there is a clear and easy choice for the best team member in X and Y, Mega Lucario. Riolu is found extremely early, before you even fight the first gym, and while it's not much help in that first gym, it's stellar against Grant later. You could wait to just get the gift one from Karina, but I personally recommend catching your own Riolu early because it's helpful against Grant. By the time you get to the Tower of Mastery, it's likely a Lucario, and then you get its Mega Stone, the first Mega Evolution you use in the game. And let me tell you something, Mega Lucario is busted. Adaptability changes its stab boost from 1.5 times to 2 times, so that's already amazing, but then the thing has base 145 attack, 140 special attack, and base 112 speed. And you have this monster before you even have 4 badges! Mega Lucario can easily sweep through the rest of the game, doesn't even matter the type matchup honestly. Ramos can't touch it, 2 of Clement's 3 Pokemon are weak to fighting, Valerie gets destroyed, Olympia is neutral, Wolfric gets obliterated, it resists Drasna, and then it beats half of Diantha's team. It is wildly overpowered. Now I know what you're thinking, Lucario is a fighting type, which overlaps with Chestnut, and I just disqualified Lucario in Black 2 and White 2 for overlapping with Emboar. However, there's a difference here. Lucario and Emboar are pretty equally effective fighting type Pokemon for a playthrough. But Mega Lucario is a vastly superior fighting type Pokemon to Chestnut. And besides, the two only share one weakness to fire. It is absolutely worth it to use Mega Lucario even if you picked Chestnut. But honestly, you shouldn't pick Chestnut anyways. Mega Venusaur is a vastly superior grass type. Now on to Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, and actually for these remakes, I'm keeping my answer the same, Manectric. The electric type is still very important in the Hoenn region, and Manectric was the best one in Gen 3, but now it's even better. Manectric got 3 big buffs between Gen 3 and Gen 6. Number 1, Lightning Rod now makes it immune to electric and boosts its special attack when it's hit. Number 2, it has many more coverage moves, including Flamethrower and Snarl. And number 3, it can now Mega Evolve. The stone can be found before you get the Mega Bracelet, which means you can Mega Evolve it as early as possible. And let me tell you, Mega Manectric is vicious. Base 135 special attack and speed. This thing will decimate so many opponents. Next up is Generation 7, starting with Sun and Moon. And up front, I want to say that Rabombi is great if you don't pick Primarina, and Alolan Muck is great if you don't pick Incineroar. I highly recommend both of those Pokemon, but of course, they substantially overlap with starters, so they can't be my pick here. They are excellent though. The Pokemon that I think is the best that doesn't overlap with any starters is Toucannon. It's the regional bird, which means you can pick it up right away on like the very first route of the game, which is nice. It's not as impressive stat-wise as some of the other regional birds, having great attack, decent bulk, but disappointing speed. But that's not a big issue here in my opinion, because the flying type is just so good in Alola. A normal flying Pokemon is good for Hala, the Grass Trial, the Ghost Trial defensively, Guzma, the Dragon Trial, Hapu defensively, Hala again, and Acerola defensively. Clearly a flying type Pokemon, potentially with the normal type tacked on, is very useful for an Alola playthrough, and Toucannon is your best flying type option in Sun and Moon. But it doesn't stop there, because it can fulfill other roles too thanks to its surprisingly solid coverage with moves like Smackdown, Brick Break, Flame Charge, Steel Wing, Thief, and U-Turn, plus Skill Link boosted Fury Attack, Bullet Seed, and Rock Blast once you get to the move tutor. Like I said, it's held back a bit by its speed, but hey, you get the Quick Claw pretty freaking early, so that can sometimes get around that. Toucannon is a very solid Pokemon that I absolutely recommend you use in Sun and Moon. However, in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, a new Pokemon was added to the game that outclasses Toucannon, Hawlucha. This Pokemon is absurdly useful in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. Like, oh my god, let's just list off the reasons why. Number 1, Hawlucha has excellent stats, which are made even more impressive due to how early you can get it, at like level 9. Number 2, you can get Cha the Hawlucha from an in-game trade before the normal trial, meaning you can use it for that battle, and it's a traded Pokemon, allowing it to conveniently level up faster. And number 3, the combination of flying and fighting stab is super effective against the majority of the major battles in the game. The Totem Gumshoos Eradicate, Hala, the Totem Araquanid, the Totem Lurantis, Olivia, the Totem Togedemaru, Guzma, Nanu, the Totem Kamou-o, the Totem Rabombi, Mullane, and Olivia again are all weak to fighting or flying. Sure, some of them can hit Hawlucha back with super effective damage, but like, come on, the fact that fighting and flying cover all of those battles is ridiculous. Seriously guys, whether it's the in-game trade Hawlucha named Cha or just one you find in the grass, use a Hawlucha. I've done it myself, it was great. Next up is Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, and I'll keep this one short, it's still Nidoking. Alakazam is still quite good, but its limited coverage simply cannot measure up to Nidoking's unrivaled move pool. Plus, Venusaur is not a starter anymore, so there's not even the con of Nidoking's poison typing overlapping with one of the starters. Nidoking's incredible. Then finally is Generation 8, Pokemon Sword and Shield. And to me, the choice is clear, Corviknight. Rookie D is found on literally the first route of the game, which is as accessible as it gets. Its pure flying type is also very good, completely walling fighting types rather than being neutral to them. The type combination of Flying Steel is also excellent. Not only is it fantastic defensively, since it has 2 immunities, 8 resistances, and only 2 weaknesses, but it allows Corviknight to help out in 6 of the 8 gyms in Sword, 5 of the 8 in Shield. Milo, Kabu Centiskorch, Bee, Opal, Gordy, Melanie, and Raihan. It's not hurt by sand and has the type advantage over Gigalith. Combine those benefits with its very solid stats, it's quite a bulky Pokemon, which is nice, and you have a very good Pokemon to use on your team in Pokemon Sword and Shield. So in summation, the best non-starter team members to pick in every game are Alakazam in Gen 1, Alakazam in Gen 2, Manectric in the Gen 3 Hoenn games, Nidoking in Fire Red and Leaf Green, Staraptor in the Sinnoh games, Ampharos in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, Excadrill in Black and White, Magnezone in Black 2 and White 2, Mega Lucario in X and Y, Mega Manectric in Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, Toucannon in Sun and Moon, Hawlucha in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, Nidoking in Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, and Corviknight in Sword and Shield. Greetings, Wii fans! Michael here, and most people choose their favorite starter when playing through a Pokemon game because you can beat any Pokemon game with any starter because all of them are reasonably strong. Heck, you can solo any Pokemon game with just your starter because you'll end up super overleveled. But while you can pick any starter that you want, the reality is that in every game, there is one particular starter that makes the game easier than it would be if you chose the other 2, based on how well it matches up against the big plot battles of the game. I thought it would be fun to go through every single main series game and figure out which starter Pokemon is the best pick in each of them, based on how well it matches up against that particular region's gym leaders, Elite Four members, Evil Team, and other big important story battles. So don't forget to subscribe to my channel because I'm getting really close to 1 million subs, and let's start with Generation 1 Pokemon Red and Blue, where your starter choices are, of course, Bulbasaur, Charmander, and Squirtle. The best starter to pick in Red and Blue is hands down by a mile, Bulbasaur. One of the biggest reasons that Bulbasaur is the best starter for Red and Blue is that it can single-handedly take out the first 2 gym leaders. Vine Whip is super effective against all of Brock's Pokemon and all of Misty's Pokemon. Meanwhile, Squirtle is good against Brock but mutually resisted against Misty, while Charmander is weak to both of them. When deciding the best starter, the early game matchups are the most important in my opinion because your options for team members are far more limited and your starter is already going to be your strongest Pokemon from the get-go. If you want to beat Brock but don't have Bulbasaur or Squirtle, you have to go out of your way to find a Mankey that has a fighting move or maybe a Nidoran with Double Kick as well. If you want to have super effective damage against Misty and didn't pick Bulbasaur, you have to find a Pikachu in Viridian Forest, which is really rare, or you have to go out of your way to find a grass type north of Cerulean. It's kind of annoying to have to do this, especially if you don't intend to keep those Pokemon on your team for the rest of the time. Having Bulbasaur just allows you to easily beat those gym leaders immediately. Now, the importance of what starter you pick does go down the further into the game you get because you get more access to more good Pokemon as you go along. However, Venusaur still continues to perform well throughout the rest of the game, not just the beginning. It resists the electric moves of Lieutenant Surge, which is nice if your ground type Pokemon goes down. It does not do well offensively against Erica or Koga, but its poison typing prevents their Pokemon from poisoning it, which is a nice bonus. It's not good against Sabrina or Blaine, but like I said, by that time in the game, you've had access to other Pokemon that are good against them for a while. And lastly, it matches up well against Giovanni, not just the gym battle with him, but the other 2 battles against him from earlier in the game. While his Nidos aren't weak to grass, they can't really touch Venusaur. But it doesn't stop there. I think it's the best starter for taking on the Elite Four. At the very least, it's definitely the best starter for taking on Lorelei. This may surprise you because she's an Ice-type specialist and Venusaur is weak to Ice. While Venusaur may not be great defensively against Lorelei, it is great offensively since 4 of her 5 Pokemon are weak to grass. It's especially good against Slowbro because while it's a Psychic type and Venusaur is weak to Psychic, Slowbro doesn't have an attacking Psychic type move. Meanwhile, Charizard is only good against Jinx, and while Blastoise is the best starter defensively for this fight, it can't touch her Pokemon offensively. Then comes Bruno, and Venusaur again does well. It easily decimates his 2 Onix, and it resists the fighting type attacks of his other Pokemon. The only one that's a bit scary is Hitmonchan with Ice Punch. Meanwhile, Charizard isn't any good because it doesn't get any flying type moves in red and blue, and it's of course weak to the Onix, and Blastoise, while good against the Onix, just like Venusaur, does not resist the attacks of his other Pokemon. Venusaur, unfortunately, can't really touch Agatha or Lance. I mean, it can't be poisoned by Agatha's Pokemon, but she tends to go mostly for sleep over poison. And then against your rival, Venusaur fares about as well as all the other starters do because your rival's team is balanced. In the end, Venusaur overall does way better against more big plot battles, especially the early ones, than the other 2 starters. So to me, that makes it hands down the easiest choice for the best starter in red and blue. Next up is Pokemon Yellow, and this entry is a fast one because you don't get a choice in starter. Your starter is Pikachu. It's the best starter and the worst starter because it's the only starter. Moving on to Generation 2, it's now time for Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal, where your starter options are Chikorita, Cyndaquil, and Totodile. And I think the best starter to pick of these 3 is Cyndaquil. First off, I'll address Chikorita, which is far and away the worst choice of the 3. It is weak to the first 2 gym battles. And remember how I said the earliest gym battles are kind of the most important ones? So that's really bad, but it doesn't get much better after that. The only gym battle Pokemon that Meganium has a super effective move for that it is also not weak to in return are Price's Seal and Chuck's Poliwrath. That's it. Every other gym battle either resists grass or is neutral against it, so Meganium is just not viable in a Johto playthrough. I mean, it's not really Meganium's fault. I mean, maybe it'd be better if it had a dual type, but it's already at a big disadvantage because Johto didn't repeat any gym types from Kanto, and the 3 types that grass is strong against, rock, water, and ground, all had their gyms in Kanto. Speaking of Kanto, I'm not taking that into account for determining the best starter in a Johto game because those gyms are post-game. You're gonna have a complete team by that point, so your choice in starter matters very little once you've gotten to Kanto. As for the remaining 2, I'm giving Cyndaquil the edge here because while Totodile is neutral to almost every gym, Cyndaquil is strong against some of them. The 2 of them fare about equally against Falkner, but Cyndaquil excels against Bugsy. Quilava is a bit worse against Whitney since Rollout is super effective against it, but every starter is gonna struggle against Whitney. It's frickin' Whitney. Just get the in-game trade Machop. That's how you beat Whitney. Don't use a starter. Then they're both neutral against Morty, but Feraligatr is slightly better against Chuck because it's not weak to Poliwrath. Typhlosion excels against Jasmine though, being strong against her entire team, while Feraligatr is only good against Steelix. Typhlosion is also better against Price, because while his Pokemon all have types strong against fire, none of them have attacks for those types. That means both Feraligatr and Typhlosion beat Piloswine, but Typhlosion hits his other 2 neutrally, while Feraligatr is resisted. Then they both stink against Claire, but come on, every starter stinks against Claire. So Typhlosion completely bodies 2 gyms, one of which is one of the first 2 gyms, while Feraligatr is only offensively good against a few select gym Pokemon. But Typhlosion's advantages don't end there, because it's also good against other story battles that Feraligatr isn't as good against. One example are the battles against your rival. None of the starters are super effective against his Golbat, Gengar, Alakazam, or his own starter, but Typhlosion is good against his Sneasel and Magneton, two Pokemon he has for a very large percentage of the game. As for the Pokemon League, Typhlosion is strong against 2 of Will's Pokemon, 3 of Koga's, and 1 of Karen's. That totals to 6 different Pokemon within the league. Feraligatr is only strong against 3, and Meganium's only strong against 2. With all these advantages, Typhlosion is definitely the best starter for Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal. But that's mainly thanks to its typing. Remember how I said that no gym types were repeated from Kanto to Johto? Well, grass is good against rock, water, and ground, and water is good against rock, ground, and fire. And those 4 types all got gyms in Kanto. Meanwhile, fire is good against bug, ice, steel, and grass, and only grass got a gym in Kanto, and the other 3 types got gyms in Johto. So Typhlosion was just advantaged by its typing from the start. Now on to Generation 3, and first I will real quick cover Fire Red and Leaf Green, the remakes of the original Kanto games. And unsurprisingly, the best starter stays the same. It's still Bulbasaur. All of the big plot battles remain the same pretty much, and the only real change of note is that Charizard actually has flying type attacking options now, but that really only helps its viability against Bruno. Now for the Hoenn games, those being Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, where your starter choice is between Trico, Torchic, and Mudkip. It was a bit trickier to decide the best starter here because of the version differences between the 3 games. Depending on which one you're playing, you'll fight a different evil team a different number of times, and the champion changes between Emerald and the other 2. However, after analyzing all the different options between the different versions, I still think the best starter is the same throughout all 3 games. And in my opinion, that best starter is Mudkip. The primary reason I think it's the best starter is because it's strong against 3 of the first 4 gyms, and it's not weak to the 4th one. Mudkip and Marshtomp are strong against Roxanne, Watson, and Flannery, while being neutral against Brawly. And remember, the earlier gym battles matter more to me because your team options are more limited. So it being good against 3 of the first 4 is incredible. Past that, it's still good against yet another gym, that being Tate and Liza, along with being strong against Team Magma's Numels and Camerups, plus 2/3 of Steven's team. Therefore, in Ruby, it's far and away the best option because you fight Team Magma and Steven. It's still good in the other ones too though, because in Sapphire, yeah, you fight Team Aqua, but you still fight Steven. In Emerald, Steven is replaced by Wallace, which Swampert can't do much to offensively, but you fight Maxie 3 times as much as you fight Archie. As an added bonus, Swampert gets Ice-type coverage that the other starters do not, which gives it some powerful moves against Winona and Drake, which, while they're not stab attacks, it'll still come in handy. As for the other 2, Sceptile has super effective damage against 3 gyms, but struggles if you're facing off against Team Magma rather than Aqua. It's a bit better in Emerald though, because it's also good against Wallace. Blaziken is strong against 3 gyms, all of which are in the first 5. It's also the best starter for the league due to being strong against both Sydney and Glacia, plus decent against some of Steven's Pokemon. But it struggles against both evil teams since it's weak to both Camerupt and Sharpedo. So clearly they all have benefits, so I don't think any starter performs severely badly compared to the other ones like Meganium in the Johto games. However, with Mudkip being good against 3 of the first 4 gyms, plus another gym after that, and basically an entire evil team and champion, that's really good, so it's definitely the best one in my opinion. Moving on to Generation 4, I will again real quick cover the remakes first, those being Heart Gold and Soul Silver. And much like with the last remakes, the best starter remains unchanged because most of the big plot battles remain unchanged. So the best starter is again, Cyndaquil. The only real detriment that Cyndaquil has in these new games is that Price's Piloswine gets a ground type move now. But Typhlosion is still much faster than Piloswine, so it's probably just gonna OHKO it with a flamethrower anyways. Now for the Sinnoh games, those being Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum, where your options are Turtwig, Chimchar, and Piplup. I will say up front that Piplup is definitely the worst starter because Empoleon is ugly. I'm kidding. I mean, I'm not kidding, it is ugly, but that's not the reason it's the worst. Piplup is the worst starter because it's strong against the fewest number of gyms, that being 3, which is more than I can say for some other starters in some other games, but it's still less than the other 2 Sinnoh starters. It's strong against Rourke, but then not good against any other gyms until Byron. And while it's good against Steelix and Bastiodon, it's weak to Magneton. It's then strong against Candace thanks to its steel typing, but after that it's really only strong against Bertha and Flint. And Bertha's risky since Empoleon is weak to ground. Meanwhile, Turtwig and Chimchar are good against 4 gyms each. Assuming you make it a Monferno before taking on the first gym, the Chimchar line is good against Rourke, Gardenia, Byron, and Candace. Turtwig is good against Rourke, Wake, Byron, and Volkner. They're also good against 1 Elite Four member each, Aaron for Infernape and Bertha for Torterra, while also being good against 2 of Cynthia's Pokemon in Platinum. Infernape is good against 2 in Diamond and Pearl, while Torterra is good against 3 because she has a Gastrodon. They seem to be pretty balanced, but I think I have to give the edge to Chimchar. 2 of Chimchar's good gyms are in the first 4, and they're actually the very first 2, which, like with Bulbasaur, is a big deal. Meanwhile, Torterra, 2 of its are in the first 4 in Diamond and Pearl, but only 1 is in the first 4 in Platinum because Wake got moved to be the 5th gym. Also, some of Turtwig's advantages aren't as good as they might seem at first. Against Wake, only 2 of his 3 Pokemon are weak to grass, and 2 of them carry ice moves which decimate Torterra. Also, while Torterra's Earthquake is good against Team Galactic's myriad of poison types, it doesn't get Earthquake until it's a Torterra, meaning up until that point, it's really weak to all those poison types. Infernape also has the advantage of being fast and not having a 4 times weakness, so because it can outspeed opponents, it's more likely to take them out before it can take them out. Whereas Torterra, if the opponent has a stray ice move, it could be in trouble. Additionally, you fight a ton of Bronzor in this game because pretty much every Galactic admin has one, and Infernape excels against them because they have Levitate, so Torterra can't hit them with Earthquake. Infernape also has an extremely wide move pool, which benefits in giving it a lot more coverage than the other 2 starters. So with all of that in mind, Infernape/Chimchar is the best Sinnoh starter. Now on to Generation 5, and I'll start with Black and White, because Black 2 and White 2 have very different gyms, so they could result in a different best starter. The options for your starter in all 4 of the games are Snivy, Tepig, and Oshawott. For Black and White specifically, the best starter is definitely Tepig. Thanks to it gaining the fighting type upon evolution, that gives it a lot more offensive advantages that the other starters don't get because they remain pure typed. It's strong against Lenora's normal types and Berg's bug types, 2 of the first 3 gyms, then later excels against Bryson. It also hits 2 of Clay's 3 Pokemon super effectively, but that's more risky since they're good against it too. In the league, it's very good against Grimsley and can hit 4 of N's Pokemon and 3 of Ghetsis' Pokemon for super effective damage. Additionally, Team Plasma tends to carry a lot of dark types, which Emboar, thanks to its fighting type, handles with ease. It's also really strong against Charon's Liepard and Bianca's Stoutland, the 2 Pokemon that they get first after getting their starter, so you'll be able to take advantage of that advantage for pretty much the entire playthrough. As for Snivy and Oshawott, they're really only good against 1 gym, that being Clay, and even then they're only good against 2 of his Pokemon each, which Emboar is too. So because they have almost no advantages while Emboar has quite a few, Emboar is clearly the best starter for Black and White. But what about Black 2 and White 2? These games replaced the triplets, Lenora's, and Bryson's gyms with Charon's, Roxy's, and Marlin's. So is Emboar still the best starter? Yes. Yes, it is. But it's not as good as it was. If you get your Pignite to level 17 to learn Arm Thrust, it crushes Charon, but that is over-leveling a bit, so that gym is a maybe. While the matchup against Roxy's Coughing is neutral, Pignite crushes Whirlipede. It's good against Berg, like before, along with 2 of Clay's 3 Pokemon like before. Skyla now has a Skarmory that she didn't have before, which Emboar's fire attacks are good against, but Emboar is also weak to Skarmory's flying moves, so it's kind of a 50-50, like with Clay's Pokemon. After that, though, it's not much use until the Elite Four with Grimsley again. So Emboar went from being strong against 3 gyms for sure, to 1 plus 2 iffy ones, due to the leveling thing with Sharon, and with Roxy, it's only good against 1 of the 2. However, all 3 of those gyms that it's at least maybe good against are the first 3. Meanwhile, Snivy is now weak to 2 of the first 3, while Oshawott is in the same situation it was before. It's just good against Clay and like neutral to almost everything else. Also, Emboar still has the advantage against the Team Plasma Dark types, plus it's good against Hugh's Bouffalante and can hit Iris's Hydreigon and Aggron really hard. So, while it's definitely not as good as it was in Black and White, it's still better than the other 2. Now on to Generation 6, and I will again get the remakes out of the way first. Those being Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, where the best starter is again Mudkip. The big plot battles remain mostly unchanged, and all 3 starters do get Mega Evolutions, but since that doesn't happen until about the 6th gym, I don't think those come into play a whole lot in regards to a particular starter's viability. Mega Blaziken is definitely the best Mega Evolution, but Marshtomp is still amazing against the first 4 gyms. In fact, Swampert gets a huge buff in the fact that it can now use its water type moves on its huge physical attack stat. So that makes it hit even harder than it did before, which is fantastic. Then comes X and Y, and the best starter for these games is much harder to select than all the other games because you make 2 choices. You first choose a native Kalos starter, picking from Chespin, Fennekin, and Froakie, then you beat the first gym, but then you pick a Kanto starter in addition to that. This makes things tricky because if one particular starter type is better against the region as a whole, and then you looked at each starter choice individually, you would end up picking 2 starters of the same type, which would not lead to a balanced team. Therefore, I'm gonna tell you which starter combo is the best, which Kalos starter and which Kanto starter make for the easiest playthrough together. It was really tough for me to decide this, so if you disagree with this entry, I definitely understand. But the combinations I narrowed it down to were Fennekin and Bulbasaur versus Froakie and Charmander. The reason I selected these pairs is that I felt like the fire type was necessary. Fire is half good against Viola, half good against Grant, dominates Ramos and Wulfric, beats Valerie's Mawile and resists her other 2, and beats 2 of Clement's 3 Pokemon due to Heliolisk's Dry Skin. So of course the first fire option is Fennekin, and I chose Bulbasaur to be its partner because its offensive poison type attacks are really good against Valerie and Ramos. Yes, those are battles that Fennekin was already good against, but the other option is Blastoise, which is just not helpful in this game. It's good against Grant's Amara, and that's basically it. Charmander's partner would then be Froakie because it's really good against Grant and is excellent against Olivia. Chespin, unfortunately, just is kind of underwhelming in most gym battles. Now to compare the pairs. So Fennekin and Froakie are evenly matched against Viola, but Froakie is better against Grant. After that, they're both strong against about the same number of gym leaders and Elite Four members. So because of that, that may seem like I'm going to pick Froakie as the better starter here because it's better in the early game gyms, and as I've said, I value that more. However, there are other factors at play here that make me select Fennekin and Bulbasaur as the best starter combo. And there are 5 reasons why I'm picking them over the others. Number 1, they're better for Karina. Braixen can hit Karina with Psybeam even if it hasn't evolved yet, but you have to have Charizard to get the flying coverage. Ivysaur also resists the fighting attacks, while Frogadier does not. Reason number 2, Delphox is not weak to the electric type moves that Charizard is weak to, which matters big against Clement. Mega Charizard X fixes this, but you may be playing Y. Reason number 3, if you are playing Y, Mega Charizard Y's Drought can harm your Greninja's effectiveness. Reason number 4, having an offensive poison type attack to handle fairies super early on thanks to Venoshock on Ivysaur is extremely helpful. And number 5, while not having Greninja against Olivia means you don't have super effective offense against her, Delphox still resists her. Now for the Generation 7 Alola games, where the starter options are Rowlet, Litten, and Poplio. And I think the best starter is the same in Sun, Moon, Ultra Sun, and Ultra Moon. And that starter is Poplio. Poplio does all right against the Totem boss fights. It's good against the Raticate if you're playing Moon or Ultra Moon thanks to Disarming Voice, but it's neutral on the Gumshoes. It's neutral against the Water Trial, excels at the Fire Trial, does poorly in the Grass and Electric Trials, is neutral in the Ghost Trial, and decimates the Dragon Trial. Incineroar fares similarly well, swapping the Fire and Dragon Trial advantages for the Grass and Electric ones, plus Ghost against the non-Mimikyu Pokemon, while Decidueye does much worse than the other two. So Primarina and Incineroar fare pretty similarly against the Totem battles, but what makes Primarina much better than Incineroar, in my opinion, is how it performs against the Kahunas, in which it has super effective attacks for all of them. Disarming Voice is good against Hapu. Olivia's team is weak to Water. Nanu's is weak to Fairy, and Hapu's is weak to Water or Fairy with her Flygon. Primarina can single-handedly beat all of them. Incineroar does a bit better against Team Skull because they tend to have a lot of poison types, but you can't ignore that Primarina beats all of the Kahunas and does well in the Totem battles. It is the best starter in Alola, definitely. Next is Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee, and like with the yellow version that they are based on, you do not get an option in starter. Let's Go Pikachu, you get Pikachu. Let's Go Eevee, you get Eevee. So those two Pokemon are the best and worst starters because they're the only starters. And finally is Generation 8 Pokemon Sword and Shield, where the starter options are, of course, Scorbunny, Sobble, and Grookey. I must say, of all of the games and all of the generations, I think these are the games where the starters are the most evenly matched. A big reason for that is that the first 3 gyms are Grass, Fire, and Water, and then the 4th gym is one that all of the starters match up neutrally against. So therefore, all of them are good against exactly one of the first 4 gym battles. After the first 4, Inteleon and Rillaboom do well against the Rock Gym if you're in Sword, with Inteleon being better here since only half of Gordy's Pokemon are weak to Grass. They're also both good against Raihan, since 2 of his 4 Pokemon are weak to Grass and Water. Cinderace does well in the Fairy Gym since it resists all the Fairy attacks, and it dominates in the Shield-exclusive Ice Gym aside from Lapras. It's not much help against Raihan, but it does really well against Rose. With all of this in mind, I've decided that I think the best starter in Sword and Shield is Scorbunny. While it's only good against one of the first 4 gyms, just like the other 2, the one it's good against is the very first one, where you have the fewest number of team options, so that's pretty nice. It's the only starter equipped to handle the Fairy Gym, so it gets an extra gym point there, and in Shield, it's amazing in the Ice Gym, and in Sword, it still can help out in the Rock Gym because it gets fighting type coverage. That fighting coverage can also come in handy against Raihan because 2 of his 4 Pokemon are weak to fighting. Also, being able to sweep through Rose's team, which is not a gym battle but might as well be counted as one, is really impressive. It has 4 times super effective hits for 2 of his 5 Pokemon, and the other 3 are all weak to fire. That's really good. Cinderace also handles Hop's regularly appearing Corviknight, plus his Dubwool and Snorlax thanks to fighting coverage, which also helps against Marnie. It's not that great in the Champions Cup, but it can handle Leon's Mr. Rime and Aegislash. Also, I think Pyro Ball is the best starter exclusive move because it's extremely strong. It's Fire Blast, but physical and stronger and 100% accurate. That's really good. So in my opinion, all 3 of the starters are good, but Cinderace edges the other 2 out by a bit. So in the end, the best starters in generational/regional order are Bulbasaur, Cyndaquil, Mudkip, Chimchar, Tepig, Fennekin and Bulbasaur together, Poplio, and Scorbunny. Wow, that's a lot of fire types.